Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you out to our Planning and Development Board meeting tonight. Madam Secretary, we'll start with a roll call.
Okay, Mark Langelo, Michael Boyd,
Here.
Jack Corbett,
Here.
Timothy Connor, Michael Goodman, Anthony Lombardo,
Here.
Dan Wilcox. We do have a full quorum.
Okay, thank you. Would you please join with us in pledging the flag? Pledge allegiance to the flag. And to the republic one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the next item on the agenda is approval of the June 11th regular meeting minutes. Anybody from the board?
I wasn't here, so I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Before we get started, I'd like to make an announcement for the benefit of the public. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding. The audience should refrain from clapping, booing, or shouts of approval or disapproval. To avoid potential legal ramifications and possible overturning of a decision by the courts, a public hearing must be fair in three respects: form, substance, and appearance. There will be time limits observed in this meeting. Staff will have a 10-minute presentation. The applicant will have a 15-minute presentation unless they extend the time by consensus of the board. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker or 5 minutes if speaking on behalf of an entire group. An applicant rebuttal and a closing staff comments are 10 minutes each. The staff has asked that we change the agenda just a little bit and start with item number 5, go to item number 5 on the agenda, and we'll do items number 5 and 6 first because those should be relatively quick. And then we'll come back to item number 4 and then item number 7. Anybody have any objection on the board to that?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. So we'll start with item number 5, quasi-judicial requiring disclosure of ex parte communication. Anybody on the board have anything to disclose?
No, sir.
No, none, okay. This is project number 20240500052. It's a variance in the M1, the MH1 Rural Mobile Home District. Mr. Mingle. Oh, I'm sorry.
Simone Kenny, planner. All right, this is a before-the-fact variance for a fence in Daytona North at 4101 Butternut Avenue. The future land use is residential low-density rural estate. The zoning is MH1 rural mobile home. The flood map does not show a special flood hazard as the property is located in flood zone X. The soils are primarily Riviera fine sands. There are no wetlands on the property based on the National Wetlands Inventory. Again, this property is described as Lot 6, Block 158 of Daytona North. It's approximately 1.14 acres, having a width of 165 feet and a depth of 300 feet. The required front setback for a fence in the MH1 district is 25 feet. The applicant is requesting a relief of 8 feet. Again, this is a before-the-fact variance, and no comments or objections have been received so far. Mr. Wilhite, the contractor for the property owner, submitted a variance application to place a 6-foot solid PVC fence 17 feet from the front property line. There are 2 sections of our code pertaining to fences, the first of which requires that fences in the residential districts can be up to 6 feet in height on the side and rear property lines and can be 6 feet in height at the front setback, but cannot be greater than 4 feet if it's within the front setback. The front setback in the MH1 district is 5 feet. In order to place the fence 17 feet from the front property line, the applicant is requesting 8 feet of relief. The main justification for the variance provided by the applicant is the owner's desire for privacy due to the unique nature of the single-family home which has generated attention from the neighborhood, and the fact that there is a pond located in front of the home partially within the setback. Building the fence to meet the required 25-foot front setback would place part of the 6-foot fence within the pond. A permit has been issued for the 6-foot PVC fence on the sides and rear property line. The contractor clarified that this fence at this point does not encroach into that 25-foot setback, as they are waiting for variance approval. The second kind of fence requirement in our code is our vision clearance regulations, which state that in all use districts, no fences, walls, shrubbery, signs, marquee, or other obstruction to vision between the heights of 2.5 and 10 feet from the street level shall be permitted or maintained within 20 feet of the intersection of 2 right-of-ways or the intersection of a right-of-way with a driveway. This requirement can be visualized as these site triangles, which are 2 triangles on each side of the driveway, starting at the intersection of Butternut Avenue right-of-way and measures the minimum 20-foot distance. The requested relief would encroach into the bottom 3 feet of each site triangle. Your options as the board are to approve project 2024-05-0052 for an 8-foot front setback variance from the required 25 feet setback in the MH1 district. Or you can find that all the variance criteria have not been met and deny project number 2024-05-0052. Or you can determine that there is not enough information and continue the project to a time and date certain. If there is a decision on a denial, we would ask that you call out specific criteria that are not met. With that, I will close awaiting any questions or comments from the board and submit the report for the record.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from the board? Questions?
I have a question. So you mentioned that if the fence is within the setback, we require 4 feet,
Yeah, if it's
but
in,
they're asking for still the 6 feet within the setback.
yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, and if it was at 25 feet, part of the fence would be in the pond, but not all of it, right? Just on the one side?
Yeah, just on the, I believe that's the west side there.
I do have a question. So nothing is built at this time?
They have their fence on the sides and the rear, permitted and approved, but not in the front.
I'm talking about the structures themselves.
Oh, the house is built.
Oh, the
I just
hou- and the
pulled
po- and
this
the pa-
image
and
from the
pond
plans.
is in place?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. If the applicant's present and wishes to make a statement. If you please come to the microphone and state your name and address, please.
I'm Dave Wilhite, live at 850 East Lambert, Monell, Florida. This is a project I took on after it had started. The pond was being dug, it was completed before I became associated with the project as a general contractor. They did that as part of the land clearing. And where it is now, if the water was all the way up, the fence would be fine. But when the water goes down, you could go under the fence without any problem. They're wanting to maintain the 10-foot or the 8-foot height because it's a privacy fence. They're wanting it for privacy due to all the people driving by. You can ask a lot of people in this county, have been by the Dome House, and they'll say, "You mean the one on Butternut?" It's well, you saw the picture of it. It's a very unusual looking predicament I got myself involved with. No, it's a very well-built house, very solid. It has 3 inches of spray-on foam and 3 inches of concrete is the main structure of the home. Anyone have any questions about the fence? Have you seen the fence that we're wanting to put up?
No, I was going to ask a visual of the fence. And then you mentioned it's a 6-foot high fence, correct?
4 foot. Or, no, I'm sorry, 6 foot.
It's a
Yes,
6 foot.
We had within your packet a copy of what I think Mr. Wilhite's going to show. It was a single page that showed the details in black and white on the vinyl fence. It was towards the end after the TRC comments.
If I may approach,
Yeah.
here's the color brochure. There's a warehouse in Benell that's I would be buying this from.
So it's the white PVC or I guess they're all the same, right?
Yeah, he's chose to go with the tan and the horizontal
I gotcha.
pickets, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the board have any more questions?
No.
Thank you, sir. We'll open it up to the public. Any member of the public wishing to comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll close public comments and go back to the board. What's the pleasure of the board?
I don't see much of an issue to it. The line of sight was a little bit of a concern, I guess, because there's, you can't really see through it, right? So, entering in and out, it looked like there was a little bit of a, in regards to what, what's allowed to, or preferred to what they'd end up having. But, I still really don't see because there's such a, once you get outside the gate, there's still a significant amount of space between the entry out or exit out and then to the, to the actual road to make your turn left or right. That's a big piece of property as well, and I can understand where the applicant's going with the pond being, when it's lower, being able to access underneath that fence. If it's running across the top of it, I could see that being an issue as well. So I'd say the only other, option would be, you keep the fence, jog it out and bring it around the lake, offset it a little bit. But that would, be a little bit less eye appealing, I guess. But I don't see any issue. What do you guys think? Right.
There's no one here objecting to it, so
Right.
if the neighbors had a problem, they would have been here. So I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we'll go to item number 6 on the agenda. This, too, is a quasi-judicial item requiring disclosure. Any member of the board have anything to report? Seeing none?
No.
This is project number 2024020066, site development plan in the PUD district. Is that Mr. Mingle?
Yes, sir. So I've got the graphic here showing where this project will sit in relation to the Hunters Ridge project. And so in that northwest quadrant of the roundabout, that intersection created by the two roads, Hunters Ridge Boulevard and Airport Road coming together. And that area is known as Primrose. And On the future land use map, we have it designated as mixed-use, low-intensity. Planned unit development is its designation consistent with the DRI development order Zone X, not part of a special flood hazard area. And a mix of soil types. There are some depressional soils that are present. Those also correspond with wetlands that are present on the property. You'll see that in part of the plan set. Remembering here that wetlands are, for the most part, handled through basically an on-site mitigation bank through that conservation dedication of the conservation lands. And so that as those projects then are permitted, there is separate water management district permitting that places conservation easements over the conservation lands that are on a kind of a case-by-case basis for the wetland analysis that happens to the extent that the impacts occur on the wetlands within the project areas. And then here's that wetland map and show this is that area where we're talking about in relation to Primrose itself, so that you have that spread of the wetlands, some of which are interconnected. We do have this isolated wetland that does show up within the limits of the Primrose project. So as it sits at parcel acreage, 27.14 acres more or less, and this particular approval is for that PUD site development plan, and then adding development criteria. Remembering in these DRIs, this one, Plantation Bay particularly, we don't have parcel-specific development criteria, so what we're doing is basically going back and adding that in, where before we had the plat addenda that would do this. Now we're going into that PUD site development plan, PUD development agreement framework that we have used most recently. In that master development order, also within map H, Primrose is identified for mixed retail, office, and services use, a maximum permitted intensity of 239,841 square feet, and that does match up to a 0.20 floor area ratio based on that 27.41 acres. So we're right at that at 20% basically, and a 45-foot maximum height. I did note in the staff report that DRI obligations have to be satisfied before final site plan approval can occur. Principally what we're talking about there are transportation impacts. There is transportation mitigation that gets pretty complicated in the Hunters Ridge DRI development order. And much of that depends on who is completing what phase of development. And that will need to be satisfied before we go forward to final site plan. But nothing more for us to consider here other than just for us to mention it at this point. That it is something that needs to be watched for. When you think about it intuitively, those final impacts as those come forward to the final site plan, they have to be tied to that because we don't know what's going to go there right now. So we don't know if it's going to be that anchor grocery store or if it's going to be a 100-seat restaurant. Transportation impacts all tied to those types of uses. So as we get closer to the final, we'll get a better idea of what's going on there. This initial phase sets out no more than 76,628 square feet in 2 buildings. And so if you imagine this, they could come in with that something more specific, tying down those uses, but that initial phase is going to be no more than 76,628 and potentially no more than 2 buildings. Parking, a little unique here. They did set that at 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet, recalling that most of our uses in the land development code are one space per 200 square feet of gross floor area. So they're doing the 1 per 250. They did have this item in there, and I think in the staff report, I incorrectly left off the percentage sign, but it's those uses like restaurants and theaters, they see 10% of the total floor area. Then the parking will be based on the minimum included in the LDC plus the 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet. The way that works out right now, it's 900 and change is what they're showing on their plan, consistent with the square footage that they've shown in their buildings as an example at this point with the plan. And that raises that final item there related to the plan itself. It's likely going to change as this moves forward. And so be prepared. You may see this several iterations, not unlike other developments that we've had. A commercial PUD is a little harder because you're chasing some ways the market. But for all intents and purposes, this is checking the box for that mixed retail office services, what we expect to be a shopping center that's going to be here with that associated parking. noting that Phase 2, as you see on that phase line, Phase 2 is linked to the extension of Hunters Ridge Boulevard. And so that's kind of why that magic is there, why you have the line where you have it, because at this point, Hunters Ridge Boulevard's not listed as being part of this developer's obligations. That's part of what we believe the master developer, the new master developer will handle as part of their work. And then that Phase 2 or future phases with this won't occur until that Hunters Ridge Boulevard extension happens. And then for the record, no objections or comments have been received at this point. Here's what this looks like in graphic form, and then looking then to the top left, and what you see there as being the north arrow, you have Airport Road running that east to west, kind of in that right-hand side from the top to bottom. And then again, Hunters Ridge Boulevard, that phase line I'm talking about is basically here, where that end of current construction happens, and then that phase line follows through the drawing, actually right here. And so it steps over. And then that extension then that will happen then will determine the timing of the future phases that happen. Then greater detail, I pulled out the site data table from that top right-hand corner of this, and you can see that it's consistent with what we've seen in the development agreement, what I presented here. We do anticipate these to be separate lots at this point, but it could develop all with a lease type setup. If it is lots, then it will require plat. But if it's instead a leased area, then a plat won't be required. It will come in as a final site plan only. And so that option is available and out there. This one being the utility plan, a little hard to see, but it is part of your packet. You did have the ability to kind of zoom in on this, and very preliminary again at this point, but you do have those connections happening basically off of Airport Road is what this is showing more than anything else. And then this one should be the drainage plan. This shows that limits of the upland buffer, the retention areas that are proposed to the north, and then also then to the southwest portion of the property. Again, north of Airport Road is where that one pond's going to go. Trying to avoid those wetlands at all costs as you can, but as you expect, there are wetland impacts, and this was included within your packet with the existing site conditions, shows those wetland impacts that are anticipated to occur as part of the development plan. This is a detail also from the plan set showing the landscape, extent of the landscaping. This is at that north end. This assumes, and at the top, that Hunters Ridge Boulevard has been extended, the future road, then the future roundabout that are there. That at the far north end, this shows you a very general schematic of our landscaping requirements applied to this property. So you have a perimeter landscaping requirement, and then also a minimum amount of landscaping in each of the islands within what we call the VUA, the vehicular use area. And so that shows these on that north half of the property. This is the same for the south. And then there was a detail also in the plan set as part of the landscape plans. I didn't copy it here. The options available for the board related to this site plan and PUD development agreement are first approval, recommendation for approval that be made to the Board of County Commissioners for the PUD site development plan, PUD development agreement for Primrose at Hunters Ridge. Board could recommend denial of the PUD site development plan and PUD development agreement, or could continue it to a time and date certain. We'd ask that if denial happens, that you state reasons on the record for the recommendation for denial. For continuance, we'd ask that you tell us and the applicant what more you'd like to see from us in order for us to come back and prepare better for the next iteration of this. Both Jared Trent and Mark Doust are present on behalf of the applicant. If you have any questions, I don't know if they have a formal presentation as much as they're both present here. And with that, I'll close. Wait any questions or comments, submit my report for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Mingle, approval will be for the whole project, or will it be approved in phases?
It will be for the entirety of the graphic that you see here, but the extent of it at this point would be that phase line, so that much of it, in fact, the entirety of this is very subjective right now. But if there was any, the extent of the present approval is the entirety of it with the phase line that's shown here, phase one, and so the rest of this is very much a guesstimate. It's included. There are some obligations that the owner needed to meet in order to meet some timeframes, and this satisfies those obligations of giving basically a schematic of what development would look like. And so this meets that requirement, but very much oriented, phase one is what is, this is intended to be limited to, with phase two being, if anything, hypothetically displayed here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I mentioned, Sean was saying the sidebar. You can see, maybe I hadn't said it, hopefully you can see that, that where my cursor is shown, this is the extent of the road construction at this point. So that, right now, that's the limit, and that's what basically is causing the, the limits for the phase one construction. And you can see the cutout there that goes to the residential subdivision that's in that northeast corner. This being the northwest. Phase two is very much dependent on the extension of the roadway north, and that's not this owner's requirement to do. This would be the future master developer, as they extend the residential development north, would extend the roadways.
Okay. Members of the board have a question for staff? If not, we'll ask the applicant to come forward and make a statement if they wish. If you would, please state your name for the record.
Good evening, all. My name is Jared Trent. I'm here with Shimento Law on behalf of the applicant Ace Luna. I think the presentation pretty accurately covered everything, so I won't make you all listen to me talk about it a second time. But I am here to answer whatever questions you might have, and I have our engineer as well to take any technical questions as well.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board?
I have a question. So going back to Mr. Mingles, so we're basically approving this first section here, using the dotted line. So the larger, this really is the smaller portion of it. This is going to go forward with just infrastructure and construction there, but later down the road, they'd come back to us for the rest of it, correct? So in regards to, I see one stormwater pond, but it's in phase two. Is there any concern in regards to stormwater, or am I missing it somewhere in this phase one section?
I think we've got the pond here that's got, that I think that's got some capacity. I think that's already baked into it. And so I think safe answer, what we had talked about through TRC, is that phase one can be accommodated without any further construction happening north of that phase line. So the short answer is that north pond is only needed with that next step.
Okay, I didn't see that pond in the rear there, so that kind of answers my question. Thank you.
You'll state your name, please.
If I
for the
might.
record.
My name is Mark Doust. I'm the project engineer. Offices are located at 528 North Beach Street, Daytona Beach. So what would happen is this plan is a guess as to what might go there. We have a deed requirement to go ahead and submit and receive a site plan approval, but at this time, we don't have any tenants identified, so this is our best guess. Most likely, what is going to happen in the future is, as tenants are identified, we are going to come back with a modified plan. But in the meantime, we need to get a approval, so this is it. So the phase one talks about the building and the parking. The pond, part of that rear pond would need to be constructed. The existing pond that we have on Airport Road is pretty much already utilized for Airport Road. So there would be some pond construction, and that would be determined at the time of phase one construction.
Okay. Any other questions?
Nope.
No questions? All right, thank you. This time we'll open it to the public. Any member of the public wishing to speak on this item? You'd come forward and state your name and address, please.
Hello, my name's Will Saffin. I'm at 3 Mellow Gold Drive in Ormond Beach, Florida, on the northeast side of where this development is being proposed. I just want to give my vote of support. I think this is a great thing for the community in that area, and I think it'll do really well and help future development in that area as well.
Thank you. Any other member of the public? Seeing none, we'll close public comments and go to the board.
I'll make a motion to approve the application.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now go back to item number 4 on the agenda. This also is quasi judicial. Does any member of the board have anything to report?
I have,
Yeah,
you want to go first?
Go
you
ahead.
go first.
I'll go first. I had 2 occasions. One, had a phone call several weeks ago, probably from a sweet lady. I don't believe she was calling me knowing that I sat on this board, though. She called me as a real estate agent that has a listing on Treetop, and just asked me a couple questions in regards to the feedback that we had on the home. Didn't really get into too many conversations in regards to this application, but she did note that it was coming up. And she's probably here in the audience right now, just not sure who she is because she said she was going to be here. And then my second conversation was with the owner of the property that we have listed. She's a very laid-back lady. She is not here tonight. And she just mentioned that there was meetings that she did not attend within the community in regards to this application. And that was the extent of our conversations.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I've had conversations with 2 property owners on Treetop Circle. Mainly, they wanted to share with me what they thought about it and then ask me what I thought about it because I happen to live on Treetop Circle. To complicate things a little further, I own a different property on Treetop, number 10, which is adjacent to the applicant's property. So I'd probably like to hear from Mr. Moylan, but given that, I probably should recuse myself for any motions or votes on this one. It's directly backs up to it.
That is certainly an option. There is no bright line rule about recusal and owning nearby properties. The question is whether there's any special gain or loss that you or your family or business associates would realize by approving or denying this item. And in determining whether there is such a special gain or loss, the standard is how big of a class does it affect? Is the effect remote and speculative or near and immediate? So it's really a qualitative analysis. The law does allow you to recuse yourself even if you feel there is an appearance of a conflict of interest. So I'm sorry, I can't give you a hard black and white answer. You could participate in this matter given that disclosure, or you could recuse yourself. Either path, I think, is legally defensible.
Well, the applicant might think I have a bias one way or another. I'm not sure. But with 4 of us on the board tonight, if I do recuse myself, do we have a quorum for a vote? I guess that's another question.
Yes. And you are, yes, they can still vote. And you also are allowed to comment on the application if you are recusing yourself.
He can ask questions and comment, right?
Correct.
Okay. So do you wish to recuse yourself?
I'll recuse myself from the motions and votes, but I will comment as needed.
Very good.
Okay. Thank you. All right. This is project number 2024-030057, a special exception in C2 General Commercial District. Mr. Mingle.
Got the parcel shown on the aerial. This also is within your staff report, and so this is that property that we've seen before for a site plan sometime back. So south of Old Dixie Highway, located west of Plantation Bay Drive. Let's see. From a future land use standpoint, entirety of it designated as commercial high intensity. Zoning is C2, consistent with that commercial high intensity designation. No portion is within a special flood hazard area. It's all Zone X. And then our soils are predominantly that 29 Uta-Rents moderately wet is what the designation was with that. And you can see that's also for most of Plantation Bay. And then wetlands showing just what we kind of expected, matching up to that uterance. So you do have the pond that's there that's been dug out, the depression, not part of this 7 acre, but in that, imagine this being a quadrants, broken up into quadrants, so the entire 10 acres up in this area here. This is not part of this request. And then down in this area off, but you'll see mention of this presence of wetlands along that basically the southwest property line. You'll see it as we continue. And those are present, and that the applicant is avoiding those wetlands as part of this application. 2.47 acres for what is being developed as this southwest quadrant of this parcel, a total of 7.548 acres. And that's the what ends up being that west half, west 5 acres, and then the southeast corner. And you'll see it here in the site plan that's going to show it in better detail. The southeast corner being a pond sized big enough for the entirety of the development, the other 3 quadrants to be developed. And then to the north, that northwest being developed, underway now, almost at its certificate of occupancy as a personal storage building inside use, and then this being phase 2 intended for outside enclosed. I do have a question or a statement to make here on some of these enclosures, because I think I was looking at the old plans. Phase 2 being this outside storage use, which prompted the special exception, providing parking for 48 RVs or boats, each angled parking space covered by a metal roof. And I think I need to fix that, and I'll look at Kim to either nod or, because we have a 35-foot rear yard setback where we abut residential, and I think that the last canopy, the 13, was removed. And so your plans show that there are 3 separate canopies, but the last set then, the 13 southernmost out of this, are not under roof. Your plans show that there are 3 sets of roofs, but your last one removed because it has to have a 35-foot setback. Remembering setbacks apply to buildings, do not apply to parking or hardscape. Each of the 2 canopies then have a minimum clear area under the canopy of 14.5 feet, minimum space width of 14 feet. Electrical connections may be provided. That was a response back to some of the questions that came out from the public. So that then the purpose of those electrical connections are for charging batteries or to keep air conditioners running on a periodic basis, just to reduce mold inside the RVs themselves. Construction plans meet the minimum requirements for the height and the setbacks, including the buffers and tree protection. That's also then with that last canopy being removed, owing to the 35-foot rear yard minimum setback. Site lighting plan submitted also shows no light cast off beyond parcel lines, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Unique for us, we haven't had much discussion about lighting until this project came up in its first phase. We don't have any formal lighting plan requirements. We don't have anything in our LDC. There's been talk of a dark sky. There's been talk of other things. Normally, as part of our special exception process, I've used for my entire career the phraseology of shielded and aimed downward. That may not be as exact as it should be, because these days now the shielding isn't what it is. It's just aimed downward. The LED lights are pretty efficient in what they come up with, but that's been the phrase that's worked for me for a long time, and that's usually been good enough, but it's also been something that maybe has not been as exact as it needs to be. Their inclusion with both phase 1 and phase 2 of a lighting schematic, I think, has helped us greatly, and I would give you a foreshadowing, be watching for that being included in the Land Development Code in the future for a required submittal. If nothing else, for non-residential development, I think we'll need to start having that happen more often. We did have substantial objections and comments that were received, mainly regarding safety and lighting concerns. I'll submit for the folks here that if you send us an email, you have received those, that they are substantial in their record and their breadth. If there was a photo, I included the photos also in there, so that that's something that we tried to catch every part of what had been submitted for the record in that record submitted to you. And so you have the entirety of that here. And then also I've stolen some of the photos here from the folks that submitted to them. Hopefully they won't mind me using them in this PowerPoint. Phase 1 received site plan approval in January 22, as you recall. Phase 1 site plan approval perhaps maybe wrongly done, but there were conditions that were placed on that approval. Ordinarily, you wouldn't see conditions on a site plan itself, but the conditions were placed nonetheless. All improvements are required to be in place, operable, and inspected prior to the initiation of use on the parcel, and the retention pond to be moved northward of its present location to provide the area for use of natural vegetation screen buffer to the residential lot south of the subject property. We note that because those were conditions made into the minutes, were agreed to by the owner at the time, and basically that second one wasn't done. The pond was not shifted northward. Natural vegetation was removed. Planted buffer, though, that has been offered up by the present owner does exceed our minimum material requirement within the buffer. But know what I'm saying, that the stuff that was there is not there now. And so the stuff that's there now is planted and not as high, not as tall, not as full as what had been there before. For the most part, I think it was pines, but it doesn't make much difference. It was what was there before was what was there, and it's not there now. St. Johns River Water Management District permit provides stormwater for the entirety of the project with wetlands in the southwest corner preserved. I think I'm accurate with that. Again, I'll look to Ms. Buck to confirm that, but that also had come up as a question. And just point that we ordinarily wouldn't talk about, but it's been raised several times and to hopefully save some of the time that speakers would end up raising it. Parcel is listed as owned by 278 Storage LLC. There's a warranty deed from August 22. It is a valid Florida corporation. There is a tax certificate issued for last year's property taxes. So taxes have been paid. They just haven't been paid by the owner. There's a tax certificate that's out there. They'll have to make sure that they end up satisfying that before any sale takes place. So the way the tax certificate process works, it can be redeemed at some future point, and that's not something anybody would want to have happen. I commingled here, just so I mention this for the record, between this slide and the prior slide, Phase 1 and Phase 2, and realizing here that it needs to be said out loud. Phase 1 is really not germane here, but I mention it because there's a lot of comments about it, and knowing that Phase 1 is the access for Phase 2. So I'm really having a hard time divorcing the two of them, but realizing that Phase 2 is your special exception. Phase 2 is the part that's the outdoor RV boat storage. We're not relitigating Phase 1. Phase 1 was part of your site plan. That's a permitted use in the C2. But your driveways for Phase 2 are through Phase 1. And so to some degree, you got to talk about it. But to the extent that Phase 1 is done or is not done, the extent for your purposes is that you've got to have completion of Phase 1 for Phase 2 to happen. For Phase 2 to be able to have its access, for Phase 2 to be able to operate, Phase 1 has to be operating. Here's that site plan I mentioned. I wanted to show you basically dividing the property up into quadrants. Again, you have that northwest quadrant, Phase 1, what ends up being the southwest quadrant being our Phase 2, what we're talking about now, the purpose of the special exception. This is that south 13 spaces that I mentioned that are not going to have the canopy on them, and then your 24 in the center that will have a canopy, and then your 11 at the north end that will have a canopy. The angled parking that I mentioned, each of these spaces then 14 feet wide, each of the canopies then in these two canopies being at least 14 and a half feet high, at least 14 and a half to give them clearance. And then the pond sized here, that buffer we were talking about, the pond that didn't shift, the buffer that was not maintained is along that, what is the southeast quadrant's south parcel line. To the south here are the residences in Treetop. Along this line, what you see here with this wiggly, jagged edge is the wetland line. And beside that wetland delineation is an upland buffer, minimum 25 feet wide. When you see mention of tree protection in what I have in a future slide, that tree protection for the most part is happening within that upland buffer area. And so that's the area where there's basically no activity happening within the development plan. So here's that graphic as soon as that. So this is in the Phase 2 landscape buffer area, that 25-foot wide landscape buffer at the south end. Again, 35-foot setback for building construction, 25-foot landscape buffer actually exceeds our requirements along the south. There's a 10-foot undisturbed natural vegetation zone out of that first 25 feet, and then the northerly 15 feet ends up being the landscaped area. And so hopefully that will be maintained. We'll be doing our best to watch it this time and to make sure that the plan is followed. The plantings that I mentioned, the existing mature trees are noted here along with their I think, size information. So that all corresponds within that wetland line that's the leftmost, and then the right line that's there is the upland buffer adjacent to the wetland itself. Then you have the plantings that are around the perimeter, and the plantings also that are occurring within the islands within the VUA, the vehicular use area. Here's that plant list. It corresponds closely with what we saw on the previous slide. And so this has the red maples being planted, red cedars, live oaks, predominantly the red cedars, 23 of those, and then 10 live oaks. Some bald cypress that are part of this also that are coming in, and then your ground covers that are part of the mix. And this table was important because, and this also included within the plan set that shows that, and we'll talk about this in just a moment with the next agenda item, the 20% of the tree requirement that's in our LDC. This would work out to 22 inches required based on the 108 inches of the tree count for phase 2. And then they are providing, according to their math, 163.5 inches. That's 107.5 inches of new trees with 56 inches of tree preservation. These are those canopies. This is that northern canopy. This is in the plan set. This, again, goes somewhat beyond what we would normally have with a special exception site plan, but was needed here, I think, for clarity's sake of what we were looking at as far as the height of those canopies, the extent of those canopies. And so those canopies then, this northernmost island, the 11 spaces that would be covered with the north canopy, that center one, the 24 that would be there. This third one is the one that was deleted because of the 35-foot setback that was needed, so that this metal canopy will not be constructed. These spaces will instead be 13 spaces without the cover on those. And then this is that lighting plan that I mentioned. And what the importance of this is that as the lighting is shown, as it's installed, as the schematic calls for each of these lights correspond to a specific light type, assuming then that they are installed as they are specified, the cast off of the light is shown here, I think in lumens. And so that as what we're looking for, the critical part we're looking for here is zeros. The zeros will show, or 0.1 will show that the light level is basically at a minimum level at the property line. I don't think this took into account the 6-foot privacy fence that is there in its cast off. It shouldn't have, because the assumption is what happens if the fence is gone. And so that, but there is a height aspect that plays into this. You have both pole mounted lights that are here. You have canopy lights. Noting here that one thing you gain from this, and this is what this is showing now. This is showing these 3 pole lights at this back end, not under the canopy. That you'll have these pole lights then they'll be mounted and directing their light into that parking area. Canopy lights being under the canopy, it's a different kind of light, I guess is the safest thing for me to say. And again, noting that there is the 6-foot privacy fence that's there, but the assumption is that 6-foot privacy fence could be there today, gone tomorrow. The combination then with the landscaping in there, the 10-foot no man's land, the undisturbed area, the 15-foot planting area, we're hoping will eventually fill in with a very substantial vegetative screen that will provide some significant opacity. And then this is the detail on those pole lights. And nothing here that's really a surprise. It's just similar to what we've seen in others, that your typical pole height is going to be that 25 feet. That's to the top of the fixture from the ground level. And so this is fairly standard now what we see. And the way this light is oriented, the cast off at the back is very limited. It's directing the light outward. If you can imagine a 270-degree arc across the front, that's where you're getting the light cast that's happening across the front from the luminaire itself. These are those specifications also included in your packet on the lights themselves. It's impossible to read here, but you do have them within your packet that's out there as part of the record. And then specific to the applicant and their statements on the beefing up of the buffer adjacent to the pond, this is back in that southeast quadrant. I wanted to go back and hit that as part of their neighborhood meetings. You saw this mentioned in the packet. They had come back and said, okay, we heard what you said. The pond didn't get moved. The contractor on the ground took out the plantings, the natural tree growth that was there, the mature tree canopy. Whatever it was, it's not there now. And so that then what they had done is specified coming back with a replanting plan that is more robust than what our code minimum requirement would have been. Excuse me. The effort here with this plan was to show that that they were exceeding our minimum requirement and in some way trying to do justice to what had been removed previously. This is one of those applicant public comment photos. So I wanted to steal it, and this shows, I believe, the result of that. Is that right, Kim, or is this okay? So that this is post. Realize this is not very impressive at this point, but this shows those plantings in place, and that those will fill in. The need now is for them to be watered, maintained as they grow. At least for the next 2 years, and that once at that point they should be pretty well settled in, and they'll be able to run on their own. This is another similar view, and we got a little bit of extra growth that's already happening with some of those. I think that's a red maple back in the background, I think is what that's showing. And so the need now at this point is to keep it watered. And so what we're seeing here on this, orientation, you're looking towards the east, property line here, the south property line, homes along Treetop. This is the other looking due east. You're seeing homes in the background that are also, I think, on Treetop, and then your pond that's here to the left. And so in both of these, you're seeing that same orientation on these. And then this was also photos, and just to kind of belabor the point again, I'm not trying to complicate matters with talk of phase one and what phase one didn't do or did do, but I think of nothing else to mention lighting concerns that I think will come up in the public comments, certainly did come up in the emailed comments that you had. And so this was the lighting. I don't know if this is before or after. I know there was a lot of work that it was done then to change the shielding on these and to change the glare. But this gives you an example. This is pretty much at the property line. At the west driveway, this is the in driveway going into the lift gate that's there. And you can see the office here and then the 2 levels of the storage that are above the office, about 3 total stories to the storage building. This is that extreme northwest corner of the building. And so you can see that entry and how that's lighted at night. And so with these, just go through these several ones. This is facing back. This is facing to the north. This is the residential development on Old Dixie that you see in the background. This is their fence that I think is lighted, and then also the trees that are uplit in their development. But this shows you the lighting that's here. And notice with this, you got to say that out loud. These lights in this one, they're on. In this one, they're off. And so these, you're seeing these same 2 wall lights, and then also the pole light here that's turned off. The building light is still on. This is that view, I think, right there at the front, and this gives you an idea, ground level of kind of what you're looking at as far as downcast. I think that Mr. Merrill, I think we'll talk about this, that he met in the public meeting with folks that, and certainly that resonated with them, and we had talked about having these set on a timer where these would cut down because there's no need to have them. What I was anticipating is something like one of those when you walk into the, lack of a better thing, I think we usually see them with bathrooms. You walk into the bathroom light turns on. You didn't have to have these necessarily off. You probably still want to have some level that's here just for some minimal protection, security. But you don't have to have them on at full strength. And so I think that maybe Mr. Merrill can talk about this, but I believe in my discussion with him that they have done some measures here to decrease that, because you can imagine what this is. This is down glare lighting down onto the front of the property, and very likely, because of its proximity to the road, has some light cast, or at least some light impacts on the road and on the development to the north. This is the backside of the property. Use some orientation. The exit would be off to your right, following in this way, so that this is looking along the south side of the building at the back side of Phase 1. And so then our parking area, Phase 2, is off well to the left here. You have one of the one-story buildings that's in between, but this is the back side. And so these are the lights then that are presently shining in that direction towards Treetop. These are facing towards the south. These lights here are facing towards the east. The pond would end up being behind the photographer here, would be behind and kind of to the rear from where they are. And then this is a view of that same back view. This is facing east here. That same, you can see the lights are off here. Here they're on, here they're off. And then this is facing to the east, same back of the building. To give you orientation here, the entrance gate that we saw was off to the left-hand side here. And then the pond, Phase 2 would be to the right. The pond would be off distant to the right in this photo. And this was one that was submitted, and we talked about this as recent as today. Had a lot of discussion. Bollard that's here is the entry bollard. We acknowledge it's tight. It's some 10 feet between the keypad and the bollard that's here on the right-hand side, within which the travel lane is expected to happen. You can see some proximity here with it's not maybe the best idea of having this right behind the parking space. Sometimes we regulate good ideas, sometimes we don't. Building code doesn't specifically come back and say, this is a good plan on your part, or this is not a good plan. We did have some feedback from the fire marshal, fire chief. I included it in your packet. We also had a discussion with the contractor who reflected that this issue, as we sit now, is not resolved. So that we have some mixed messaging that's happening within our own world here with the county. And so at best, we'll have to figure out how that's going to play out. But suffice it to say, the applicants working with our contractor, working with our fire department to try to figure out what is happening here. I anticipated that what the intent was to have a in at the west driveway and a circle drive with an out on the east side. To me, the most necessary issue at this point is there is an SOS on this one that enables the fire department to use their siren to be able to get the gate to activate. There is not one on the east gate, the exit gate. And so to me, that's the most significant change that needs to happen right now. The bollard is what it is. And if you think about it from a business standpoint, if they want to keep it in there, they keep it in there. They keep smaller or less wide things from getting in there. You got to be a good driver. Tough crowd. So with that, I think I've hit most of the issues that have come up. You have those in the comments. Also in that fairly lengthy listing that's there. We're prepared on our end to answer process questions that we've talked about. You have the entirety of the TRC that's also there for your reference. The applicant is represented by Kim Buck on the engineering side and by Rob Merrill for the applicant itself. And then I'm mentioning too, I talked about the public meetings that were involved. There were 2 public meetings, I understand, referring to those only because it's exceptional for us to have that happen. We don't have it in our code at this point. I think they are to be, at least in some way, recognized for that attempt to resolve some of the issues that you'll hear about tonight by meeting with the public in advance of this meeting. And hopefully you'll hear some statements from some folks of, our hope with that was that there was some consensus that was gathered from that. I'm not sure how close that came with that, but our hope is that there's some good benefit from that for everybody involved, and that many of the issues at least could be identified prior to coming to this meeting. Options available for the board. Approval, and if approval happens, we would suggest the following conditions. Development to occur in substantial conformity with the design drawings attached to the special exception request, inclusive of lighting, setbacks, landscape buffers. Access hours only from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily. No work to commence without issuance of a county land development permit. No occupancy initiation of the RV and boat storage use until all inspections are complete and all permits are finalized out. Site lighting to utilize dark sky methods. No business may operate from the premises. What we mean there is a business tax receipt shall not be issued for any business on the subject parcel other than the storage use. However, the parking of commercial vehicles and equipment shall be permitted. And then other conditions as added by the Planning and Development Board as part of the recommendation following the public hearing. And so what we anticipate is if you have some conditions, you will add those. Those will become F through whatever. And F will drop out. If you don't have conditions to add, then F will drop out on its own. We don't intend to include this other conditions as added as a condition to be met by the applicant. Another option would be actual denial of the request and then placing then on the record reasons for the denial, recalling that you have the 9 special exception criteria, be specific to those on what has or has not been met. And then the third option would be continuance of this request to a time and date certain, preserving public notice, also making sure that anyone here who's in opposition or those who are in favor know when they can come back for the next meeting and be able to then follow this process forward. With that, I'll close, wait any questions or comments, and I'll maybe first turn it over to Mr. Moylan to see if he has any comments that maybe will help guide you in your deliberations now at this point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The only thing I need to add at this point is that I would ask that the fire issue be made one of your conditions if you're inclined to approve this. That's based on the memorandum we received just today from the fire chief. For the purposes of the record, the Florida Fire Prevention Code section is 18.2.3.5.1.1. We need to get rid of that bollard. They need a 20-foot wide entrance, and they need to be able to exit that east gate without having to back up the fire apparatus. And that's all I needed to add.
Okay, thank you. Any member of the board have a question for staff?
Yes, I do. Adam, I have a question as far as the site plan. I see that the outside storage is done in, I guess, east to west. Couldn't it have been turned the other way and gone north to south and get the same amount of parking? I mean, I just did a quick takeoff on here, and this way it wouldn't affect the people along the south as much.
Maybe let Ms. Buck talk about that, and so that I think that could be. I like this because there was an aspect that was being discussed early on at TRC because it would not have the permanent structure abutting this. When we talked about the 35-foot setback, now realizing still that I don't know if we're really doing a whole lot there different. Maybe from an operational standpoint, if I was. And maybe I'd be encouraging maybe not RVs to be parked in those 13 spaces. Maybe those could be boats so that they wouldn't have such massing. If I'm saying no canopy, great, but I don't gain anything if I have a 14-foot tall, or I have 13, 14-foot tall RVs parked there. So what? I don't have a canopy. I got the visual impact. Still, maybe worse.
And I was just thinking about the distance from the homes where
Understood.
the first parking spot would be, and they could still do the same layout, but just make the last ones on the south side without the canopy and the ones furthest away with the canopy. I'm just asking, is that an option?
Good question.
Any other questions? I have one. Adam, the canopy we're talking about, that's just a metal roof?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Basically a pole barn type thing?
Yes, yeah, and would meet wind load requirements, would have underlighting, as they've talked about so far. No utility connections, other than potentially electric hookups that would be there for purposes of plugging in your RV to provide minimal power. These would not be set up for occupancy in any way.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I do have a question, Adam. So the pole lighting you had mentioned in the area that's uncovered, if that was covered, then they wouldn't use pole lighting, they would use under canopy lighting?
That's right. That's, I think I'm safe in saying that because in this one here, I think I'm seeing that there are 3 pole lights now, where before there was a canopy and it would be under canopy lighting, and that, and not to say the light impacts would be substantially different, but they would, I think if you think of it, they would be at least lower, because under the canopy lighting, the canopy being at least 14 feet, 6 inches of clearance, they would be lower than the 25 feet pole lights.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, if no other questions for the board, we'll ask the applicant to come forward, state your name.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rob Merrill with the Cobb Cole Law Firm. My address is 1 Daytona Boulevard in Daytona Beach, here for the applicant. First, I want to thank you guys, because this is not an easy job, and I know you're volunteers, and I especially want to thank Sean and Adam. I've been doing this for 38 years, and these guys are some of the best in the business. So I hope you will trust their judgment and the advice that they've given you tonight. I think Adam's staff report, both given to you tonight and the package that you have, clearly reaches the conclusions that we've checked off all the boxes for this special exception. I say that loosely. We can go through it in detail if you like, and I'm happy to talk about each one of the components of the criteria that we have to meet for you guys to say yes to this. I think that the DRC has fully vetted this and all of the technical aspects, other than the late-breaking news from the fire folks, which I will say on the record, both that late-breaking condition as well as the others that Adam outlined, we're willing to adhere to, so we're good with those. I want to say just a little bit about sort of the nature of this request and this process. And I'll let Sean elaborate to the extent it's appropriate. But we're not here, and you guys have done special exceptions, but you've done variances, you've done comp plan amendments, you've done rezonings, you've done plan development zonings. This is not a change of use. It's not a plan development. It's not a rezoning. It's not a comprehensive plan amendment. It's not a variance. Special exceptions are uses that are allowed in your code, but they have certain boxes that need to be checked, certain criteria that you need to adhere to. And as Adam has given you both in his verbal and his written presentation, we have successfully, in his professional opinion, including Sean's and the other DRC members' opinions, done that. We've met those criteria with the plan that's in front of you. And so to the extent that there's any question about the plan, we're happy to walk through that with you, and Kim can help. But I want to say a little bit about, and again, Adam mixed the front property with the back property, and he did that. I think it was appropriate because in large part they're connected with a vehicular access. They don't have to be. So I want to make sure you guys understand that the other property in the quadrant to the east along the frontage would also provide access to this property if we chose to do that. We don't. We think this as a unit is a better plan. We think it's better not just for us, but for the neighbors and everybody else. If you guys have, I'm sure you've encountered self-storage facilities and you've done approvals. I don't know whether there have been any recently. It seems like there's one out on US 1 that's not far away from here. And so at least you've encountered them. Maybe you've put things into self-storage, or you have at least been in the vicinity of one. They're extremely low impact. So I've done many dozens of these in different jurisdictions for different clients that have done them. And when you speak to a city manager or a city planner or an elected official or someone who has been through this process that we're going through right now, as painful as it might be, at the end of the day, they really don't have much negative to say about it. They're very quiet. They're secure, especially the modern ones. They have, security like we've talked about already. They've got cameras. They're gated. They're very highly restricted in terms of what people can or can't do there. The vehicular trips that come in out of a self-storage facility are so minimal. I sometimes say it's less impactful than a graveyard, but sometimes a graveyard has more people visiting the dead. So it really is a very low impact use. You find that it generally now has nice architecture. It's not the old, where you see the exposed doors to the road and everybody knows that's what it is. Now it looks something like an office building or an apartment building or something that's nicely done architecturally. You've seen the pictures here. It's a nice building. I know there are questions about the lighting of it, which we can talk about. I think one of the things that people don't think about is that, and this is factual, when these things are built, they're typically around residential areas because what happens is people get their junk out of the garage, or junk, whatever it is, and they store it. They take their RVs out from the side yard and they put them in a place where it's more self-contained, or their boat, and it cleans the area up. So I have seen in my professional experience, code enforcement people say that there are less code enforcement problems as a result of self-storage, new self-storage coming into a community. So it has that effect. In my opinion. The conditions that Adam just outlined involve hours of operation, so we're okay with having it be a 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Close. The dark sky lighting, I think, is important and relevant here. The landscaping that we're proposing, as Adam mentioned, and I'll reiterate, is I think it's more than twice what you guys would require under your code for the C2 zoning. We're 10 feet of undisturbed area, 15 feet of planted landscape, which was outlined in great detail by Adam in terms of the species and everything else, which we can, Kim can answer questions about further if you like. But the punchline of that is it's a lot more than what's required. And speaking of that, I think it's relevant to you guys and important for your consideration to understand what it is that could be built there. So I'm going to pass out, and Adam didn't put this as one of his. Yeah.
Give one to hand if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Over to the clerk.
Give everybody one. So I feel like this is an appropriate context for you guys to see. And when you go down the list, it's kind of self-evident, but retail sales and service, auction parlors, automobile service stations, bars, bowling alleys, daycare centers. I'm just skipping through some of them, just hitting highlights. Game rooms, arcades, nightclubs. Thanks for turning that down. I was getting too loud. Restaurants, theaters, just, on down the list. Automobile sales, boat and mobile home sales, veterinary clinics, car washes, hotels, motels, nightclubs, bars, mini warehouses, which of course is the existing building is based on that allowance. But understand that with a 10-foot required buffer in your code, no lighting limitations, as Adam mentioned, there aren't any. All this stuff that we've been doing with lighting is voluntary. 65-foot height limit. I mean, I'm giving you the extreme so you can picture that we're not asking for something extraordinary here. We're actually doing just the opposite. We're reducing the intensity of what's requested by tenfold. A 65-foot building on the rear property line within 35 feet with a 10-foot landscape buffer is the sort of the extreme version of what could be there without us having this conversation about a special exception. Why it was not included as a permitted use, I don't totally understand, but that's a legislative thing. At the end of the day, we're here asking you for the special exception. We think we've met all of the criteria. I think Adam has said the same thing. I know that you have a group of folks behind me here, most of whom I've met on a few occasions now. I was not involved in the construction or the permitting of the existing facility. I was brought in after the construction was complete. I attended a DRC meeting or two or three. The folks that live behind the project attended those meetings. We had a lot of conversations with staff and with the residents. And we decided that it would be a good idea to have an informal meeting And so once we had that informal meeting, we didn't have it, all of the answers because we still had some design stuff to do. So we had another meeting. So we've had 2 meetings with everybody. Okay, I'm sorry if I used that term loosely, with everybody that was invited, who decided to attend. And I think we had some meaningful back and forth. Some of it was heated, some of it was very emotional, some of it was very, difficult. And so at the end of the day, though, there were some changes, a lot of changes that were made to the plan, both the existing facility and the proposed facility. Kim can go into the details, but we did some dimming of the lighting. As Adam said, there's some things that where they get dimmed automatically. They're going to be dimmed after the 10 o'clock closing time. Some have been shielded, directed in a different direction so that they're not pointing towards the residents. The conversation about the pond that you're looking at on the screen, it did, in fact, according to Kim, actually get shifted from the plan and was built that way. But the problem was, and again, this is a previous developer who did this, their contractor was out there digging the pond. They took the trees out in the back. Well, so what, mea culpa, there was a problem that we inherited. And so what we did was we planted immediately back there what the county asked for us to do to remediate that. And then when we met with the neighbors, they said that's not enough. So we went back and we planted more. So the trees that you see that Adam was pointing out, I think the red maple and the cypress, I think a couple of cypress maybe, those are trees that are going to grow. They're going to fill out. And I understand everybody's not happy with what's there now. It's not good enough. But a lot of times when you install landscaping, it takes a few years for it to be filled out all the way. And that's, I think, what the case is here. We had a lot of conversations about other subjects. We talked about drainage. I know Kim talked a lot with the neighbors about the existing drainage situations, what the future is going to be, et cetera. And we're happy to get into the details about that, or she will, if you guys like. There was a lot of conversation about the potential for crime, for fire based on boats and RVs having fuel tanks and such. I think your fire folks have answered that question, hopefully successfully, and we're happy to go into that further if you like. I don't want to spend too much more of my time. I know there's a lot of folks who want to talk. I think they're going to talk about things that I hopefully will be able to have some answers for you guys. So I want to reserve time to do that if I could. And of course, answer any questions that you guys have or ask him to do that. Oh, your question, orienting the RV or the boats in a different direction. We hadn't really analyzed that, so I don't know. Kim, if you want to speak to it, I think she said that it certainly could be done that way. Whether it makes it better or not, we're not sure till we try to.
Away from property line.
Mr. Goodman, can you check your microphone? Sorry. Thank you, sir.
I just thought that it would be less intrusive to the people that live along that property line, and maybe calm some of them down, and this way you both are happy with the outcome.
Yeah, so it seems to me like you're putting a certain number in there, and if you reorient them, it just seems to me like they still need to be in that same square to fit that many units. I mean, if you're going to get rid of the units, that's one thing, but I think that in order for it to be viable, I'll say that, guys, I know you've heard this song and danced a million times. These guys bought this piece of property, partially developed, entitled with all these uses that I've shared with you. They made an investment, as a commercial investment in real estate here, and I know there's some real estate folks in the back here that, and up at the dais here, who understand that was kind of what happened here. And at the end of the day, they have a reasonable investment-backed expectation, as we say in the legal world. And I think that's what they're here to bring. And in the spirit of compromise, I think what they're doing here, fortuitously to the folks that are here objecting, some of them, I think this is by far, in my estimation, the best use that could come out of it. Now, I frequently encounter situations where somebody would just rather have it stay the way it is. And you know what? If it were me, that's what I would like too, probably. That's basically a private park in your backyard. And I think that it's unreasonable to expect that somebody who comes in and invests on a commercial piece of property is going to leave it vacant. And then I think we've heard suggestions, and again, I'm not putting words in anybody's mouth, so I hope they're not going to fault me for this, but I think others have suggested things on that list. Maybe they liked the daycare center or an ALF or something, but that's not the way this works, right? I mean, the market brings what it brings, and if it's listed on the list and it shows up, it's just going to happen, right? So I think that what we're trying to do here is find the middle ground, and hopefully you guys will see it that way. So any questions for us first?
Board have any questions?
Okay.
All right, we'll open it up to the public. Anybody from the public wishing to come up and comment on this item, please do so. Please remember your time is limited to 3 minutes. Please come up and state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Valerie McLean. I am a realtor for Shoreline Realty, and I'm the listing agent for 7 Treetop Trail. The owners of this property moved back to Virginia for work in February, end of February. They knew nothing about these meetings. They got no mail from the county. It just didn't get to them. They didn't know that this was going to happen until I went to move their barrels on Monday night. This house is supposed to close on Thursday, being sold to a veteran. They have an offer for $487,000 on this house. It was not disclosed to these buyers that there was a potential change in the use of the land behind it because they didn't know. I didn't know. The other real estate agent didn't know. And so depending on what is decided here at this meeting this evening will determine whether that house actually sells to these people. The real worry is that once it is discovered that there is going to be more storage behind this thing, that this family will pull out. The worry also is that when more development for storage and lighting and all of that goes in behind this property, that it will decrease their property values. I believe it will decrease the property values of every house that backs up to that property where that is scheduled to be. And I was going to say that in the course of this, having this house on the market, we had 34 viewings. People came to see the house. It's a very popular neighborhood, so they came to see the house. Of the ones that I reached out to get feedback about what they felt about the house, 22 of them responded that they loved the house, but they weren't going to look at that storage building. So I do believe that the current storage building, the way it sits, the way it is right now with nothing else added to it, has affected how long it's taken this house to sell. I believe if you add more to it, it will further affect their ability to get this price for their house again. I think they will lose money on it, and I think it will be on the market a whole lot longer. It's not anybody's fault that they didn't know about this in advance. It's not anybody's fault that we got an offer on it that might fall through. But the reality of it is that it very well, if it's voted to go through, they're going to lose this deal, and it's going to be really difficult to sell that house when already that building is an issue back there. So I look forward to hearing your decisions. I don't envy you having to make this decision. So any questions? Anything? All right. Thank you.
Any other member of the public wishing to come forward?
Hi, my name's Suzanne LaValle, and thank you for this opportunity. And I live at 9 Treetop Trail, which is right next to Mr. Corbett's property. And I did have something written out so that I could speak and not lose my train of thought. The first thing I want to mention, though, is since this project has taken place, Mr. Corbett's property at 10 Treetop Trail is flooding more than it used to. For some reason, the land is lower than mine, and it was flooding to begin with. But now, since this, I don't know what happened, but it's flooding more, and we haven't really had a good rainy season yet. But I'll be happy to take pictures and share that with you as the summer goes on. So I just wanted to start with that. I'm going to just talk. At 9 Treetop Trail, I am very concerned about what's going to be put back there as far as the RV and the boat, because we have wood frame homes there from 1987. And I thought I had to worry about hurricanes. Now I'm worrying about still the hurricanes if debris flies over that little 6-foot PVC fence. Worried about fire. I mean, if anybody lived here in the 1990s, they know what Palm Coast had. I wasn't here at the time, but I've heard about it. Also, as far as the necessity of, let's face it, RV park, RV storage, boat storage, car washes, all these things are going up all over the place. They're a dime a dozen right now through Flagler County. And as far as it being necessary for us, I don't see where it's necessary, because even within Plantation Bay, we have a little storage unit that I used to store my pop-up camper in when I had it. So we do have our own storage. And as far as it being helpful for code enforcement, well, we all live in gated communities, and across the street at the preserve or reserve, whatever, that's a gated community as well. We have our own codes, so we can't really keep all that in our yard anyway. So for us, it's not really a benefit. So it's not necessary. It's incongruous with our living. As the realtor stated, our property value is going way down. It's really incongruous to have that right behind us, and it abuts my backyard, and I use my pool quite frequently, and I have my little grandniece and grandnephew that's 4 and 2 come over, and you can see if God forbid, if a sexual predator gets back there and puts a camera up on their chain link fence, it's not really secure. And there's a chain link fence with a gate where anybody can go in the back and set up camp back there or jump our PVC fence and start robbing our homes. It's not secure back there right now the way it is. So I see my time is up. There's more I wanted to say, but this is it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other member of the public?
Hello. Thank you. I'm Jackie DiMartino. I live on the property directly west of the development. And we've worried about flooding, as she mentioned, too. The wetlands have been constantly, they are partly on our property, partly on theirs, but they've been constantly being filled in. Every time somebody does something, years ago, they cleared all the trees and they did that development that was when it was made commercial. That fell through. Nobody ever followed through with it. But then these guys came in, more dirt, fill it up even higher. It's a drainage problem. The wetlands, I love them. They can stay. You know, we have 10 acres. I don't worry about that. But my husband was very adamant, tired to talk to everybody about the drainage, because they did a pond and it's supposed to drain. But in the county, Road and Bridge told us that the south side of Dixie Highway is supposed to drain to the west. And that's not what St. John's Water Management District says on their email. It's supposed to drain to the east and go under where Plantation Bay's big ditch is beside them, and then off to Strickland Canal. That's what he asked, if that could be dug out. Nobody wants to do that. Instead, the water has to back up on our property and try to get past onto the one culvert that's there and drain westward. And it's not supposed to do that. It's not what it's made for. So I know water does not flow uphill. So I've heard that water from our property is flowing onto theirs. And I think that's pretty funny because he's got pictures of when they were doing construction and it was raining quite heavily there with the water and the flooding and everything already. And maybe the pond and all that will take care of that. But we just want that ditch in front there to take care of letting water flow eastward, as St. John's Water Management says it's supposed to. But it's not connected to that giant, big culvert next to Plantation Bay. So, and if they can't even fix something like that and get that piece of property working with the water flow the right way, why add more on, put more asphalt back there and endanger the wetlands even more? I'm sure they don't mean to. It's part of development. It's what happens. But, we got to take care of our environment and our property, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Next member of the public, please.
Could I ask before I start speaking if they could put a picture of the site plan back up? Something really quick, I just wanted to say.
Come up, state your name and address for the record, please.
Right. Hello, my name is Alan Sandiford. I live at 14 Treetop Circle. I wanted to show a picture of that, okay, just real quickly, if you look at the site plan, this is not the one with the lighting, but if you could put the one with the lighting up, the lighting that they're proposing right there underneath the canopy are 76 4-foot lights. If you look at any other place around it, Publix or any of the gas stations, that is just absolutely excessively unnecessary. Plus 11 pole lights around that property. 76 4-foot lights to light up what would be 35 vehicles underneath that. That's like a lighting up a sports arena. Anyway, I've been living at 14 Treetop Circle for almost 10 years. My bedroom is only 25 feet from the proposed outdoor storage lot. I object to giving this special exception. I feel that there are many things not in harmony with the intent and purpose of the county's regulation guidelines. Some of these conflicting issues include would not be located to minimize economic noise, glare, odor effects on the adjacent and nearby properties or homes. The economic effect of the proposed use on adjacent and nearby properties would not be positive. The height and the structures would not be in harmony with the adjacent homes. There are currently ingress and egress issues concerning traffic flow that are problematic with this proposed plan. Time will not allow me to get into the specifics, but hopefully you all read the emails requested to be forwarded to you. Our neighborhood is going through a lot. Part of the conditions for approval for the Phase 1, the storage facility, you're aware, was that the trees all came down, the vegetation, and the lighting was much brighter than they talked about it being. The trees were cut completely out from the homeowner's property. The result is a very real negative quality of life impact affected the homeowners who now have to look right at brightly lit three-story building. It's public information that the applicants are the owners of the derelict remains. They're also the owners of the derelict remains condemned old hotel across the street. Flagler County has already spent tens of thousands of dollars in ongoing litigation against the applicant. They are now in defiance of a recent court order by Judge Chris France to have paid $250,000 that they have owed for 3 years to the county. They have not paid the property taxes on most of their other many Flagler County properties, including the very property, the storage facility that they're trying to ask for a special exception on. The tax certificates have been sold on these properties. There are many news articles describing current ongoing litigation, multiple condemned properties in Shreveport, Louisiana. The articles tell long ongoing problems, including criminal negligence, blight, and fires on these properties where firefighters were injured. Why? Now they want us to give them a special exception with extreme 4-foot long, 76 of them, lights with 11 poles shining off the RVs. What basic evidence do we have to support that these same applicants would care about an outdoor boat and RV storage facility enough to keep it maintained up to proper industry standards for health and safety? Many RVs parked side by side, lots of gasoline and volatile.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Jeff Loker. I'm at 16 Hummingbird Circle, across the street in the reserve from this facility. I believe one of the most important requirements of this special exception is the necessity of this. If you look at the surrounding areas, you have a storage facility on the other side of Plantation Bay on Route 1, numerous spaces for boats and RVs. You have several on 100, numerous spaces for boats and RVs. You just approved another facility on Old Kings Road. It's going to have 160 spaces. At all the TRC meetings I've been at, the applicant has never demonstrated, never provided any data, any studies to show that there is a shortage of spaces for these type of vehicles. How many more people in the area need boats and RVs? They don't know. This is just a guess. So with this criteria not being met, I believe it's not one of necessity. It's more of greed on behalf of the applicant. Further, I had a conversation with the attorney, my wife and myself, after one of the TRC meetings, and we asked him, why did you put storage facility in the middle of a residential area? His answer, the applicant felt they could squeeze a little bit more out of the Plantation Bay owners. Key words, squeeze a little bit more. Therefore, his words alone show there's not a necessity for this. It's just to get a little more money, to get a little better use of the property. Also, he mentioned the storage facilities in the area too. He painted a pretty picture as to, oh, they're nice, they're great, they help everybody, they clean up the area. Every one of these facilities that he was talking about, and I mentioned, are not in the middle of a residential area. They're almost like in an industrial area. That's where they belong, not here. This is going to be an unsafe environment for the people over there. It's going to create traffic. You know you're not getting a fire truck in there, because if they try running a fire truck through a 10-foot space, you're going to rip the side out of that truck. I know it. Everybody knows it. It's common sense. So my final word is, if you go along with this and approve it, there's going to be a clear message sent to the people in the county. You tend to side with a developer, and you're not looking out for the benefit for the residents in the community who are going to suffer property valuations plummeting, their safety, and they're not going to have any kind of peaceful enjoyment of their property. That's what you're supposed to be looking out for, the people of the county first. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You would state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, Harriet Castle, 14 Treetop Circle. I object to the special exception application for an RV boat storage. There are safety concerns for customers having safe ingress and egress with the current entrance, which will also be used as a construction site while it's open to the public. This is not needed. There's a new RV boat storage that was approved January 9th, 2024, that's just 1.7 miles from the facility and 3 minutes away. It's interesting, Adam mentioned the 3 25-foot poles. There's 11, as Alan had mentioned. And you only have 6 on the front, which actually was too many for that project. They really don't need 6 up there either. But for some reason, they want 11 back here. And there's going to be a tremendous amount of glare on that. We're all going to be able to see it, and it's going to impact our values. Carrie Maxwell from the St. John's Water District stated that the Phase 1 permit did not include Phase 2. They also have not received the as-is-built survey and have not yet certified Phase 1 and have not received any permit for Phase 2. So I'm not even sure how that got past everybody. There's concerns about fumes from generators that are often used at these facilities, concerns for gas, diesel, possible fires. I know some of you think that's not a big deal, but we send in articles that does happen. People have to carry more insurance to protect these facilities from explosions and fires because of the amount that they carry there and the close proximity of them being together. And we have frame houses behind us just 25 feet away from all of this. The property that they already approved for is at 4290 South Old Kings Road. And there are numerous ones as well in close proximity for RV boat storage. 3 Treetop Trail is also for sale. That's been on the market for over 5 months now. And from what I've been told, a lot of people go there and they see the existing building. And because of all the trees that were taken out, they haven't been able to sell their house either. And these people, they didn't move a pond. I mean, they're supposed to move a whole pond forward. They didn't move the pond. They tore down the trees. And the attorney made it sound like, oh, they quickly tried to fix it. No, they didn't. They didn't try to fix anything until just like within the last 30 days to try to get this through. Even though we had been calling the county, calling the builder, they didn't do anything to fix those trees. And what they have done is not going to replace the damage they did. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Dale Loker. I'm at 16 Hummingbird Circle in the reserve across the street. Couple things. A lot of these communities in our areas, like one woman mentioned, already have facilities in their communities where they can put boats and RVs. I'd love to see some data that actually shows the necessity for this with what everyone said, with all the other facilities in the area that have boat and RV storage. Where's the data saying they need more? Because like my husband mentioned before, the attorney did tell us they wanted to squeeze a little bit more out of Plantation Bay people. The lighting, as far as the lighting is concerned, we've asked them numerous times. Maybe they could tint the huge windows. There's no one shopping for storage units at night, in the middle of the night. These lights shine across the street, right into our homes. This is from our street inside of our neighborhood. They need to tint those large windows. They need to remove or reduce the accent lighting. Their decorative lighting has not been touched. Okay, they've now placed a giant CubeSmart sign on the outside of the building, as well as a big sign in the middle of the lawn in front of the building. At the last meeting where they met with the neighbors, Kim did state to everyone that they would not be lit up. And I just want that put out there because we don't expect to see ginormous red lights blaring at us. The entire property it's already not being maintained. The grass is a foot to 2 feet high already. Nobody's cutting the grass. No one's doing anything. You're not going to fit emergency vehicles in there like someone else said. And originally we were told it was going to be open from 7 to 6. Now it's 6 to 10. I'm just saying they changed along the way. Everything's changed. I just don't think that it's necessary. I don't think it fits with our surrounding areas. Like I said, it's plopped in the middle of residential, all homes. And we're expected to just accept that. And how much exhaust is going to be put out when everybody's sitting there with their vehicles running so no mold gets in their RVs? How much exhaust does everyone have to sit and inhale in their backyards for that one? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next member of the public, please.
Can I get a site plan up there also?
Would speak into the microphone right there and state your name and address for the record.
Ed DiMartino, DiMartino Family Trust. I'd like to get a site plan up there.
Mr. DiMartino, the camera's there, if that's what did you want us to put we thought you.
I thought you could, of the whole
Okay, I thought you had a rolled set there, I'm sorry.
I got nothing.
You're talking about our site?
No, the whole property. All right, that'll do. Flagler County resident, 44 years. I can't believe you're fighting over a fence in the Mondex, but I guess that's where the county is now. I've been on this deal for a year and a half. Flood. I've sent planning guys, I hope you got it, videos of the flood on my property. I'm on the westerly side of this development. I've got 10 acres. All I asked for was to open up the far side of the ditch going along Old Dixie into the box culvert on that end to go to the Strickland Canal. They won't open it. And I also asked for a culvert, or not a culvert, a swale down between the properties. And they will not help me because when Plantation Bay was built, they built it up higher. I'm getting the sheet flow off of that. But before they built up my next door neighbor's property, 2150, to 3.5 feet higher than my property, it was able to run off. Now that's dammed. I'm getting all the runoff down my property out to the road. That I've been fighting with Susan Graham for 1.5 years over this, and I can't seem to get any help from the county. The county just wants to do for this thing and nothing for Flagler County residents. I don't understand. Plus, looking at my survey of 2034, there's an easement from Old Dixie Highway to the back fence of Plantation Bay. 30-foot easement. 15 on this property, 15 on my property. There's also an easement that goes along the back fence, 30 foot. It doesn't show it on here, but I know it's there because there's a fire trail. They made to open this up for Corona Volunteer Fire Department years ago. Now, apparently, the easement's there because between Plantation Bay fence and my property line is at least 30 foot. So there's a chunk of property nobody there wants to take advantage of. I went to the county asking about this years ago because people in treetops were having a problem with possible tree falling on their property. And it cost me $1,500 to have that tree taken care of because the county was saying that's my property. We need to find out whose property this is. And we need to figure out all these properties with phase 1 before we get involved with phase 2. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Beverly Nicolar, and I'm at 5 Treetop Trail. I butt right against it. They took my privacy. They took every tree behind me. I could never see Old Dixie Highway. Now, anybody traveling down, there are several spots between what trees are left that they can see right into my master bedroom and bathroom. If I can look in my mirror in my bathroom and I can see them going down that highway, then they can see me, which makes me keep all of my curtains, everything closed, have lights on. Took all my trees. They have not replanted a thing. So if they haven't replanted and taken care of what's been done so far, what makes anybody think that they'll do what they're supposed to do on that property? That's all I have to say.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, excuse me, ma'am. Could you repeat your last name? I'm sorry.
Nicolar, Nicholar.
Gentleman in the green shirt in the back, you've been standing there a while. You
All right, I'll just wait till the last person. Anybody else? Oh, okay. My name is Ray Sanchez, and I live at Bay Point, at 26 Bay Point, which is in Plantation Bay. So I'm not abutting right next to their property. However, as a member of the community, what's so important now that we need a special exception when we could have requested this in phase 1, they wanted to build that up. right? That's number one. Number two, as I mentioned before, Plantation Bay has its own storage area already for RVs and boats. And there's many around the whole area also. So my question is, what's so special? Why is this so needed that now requires special? To me, special would say it's a special requirement, right? There's no requirement for this. So why are these people here and me, as a member of Plantation Bay, have to put up with having this whole area raised out when it's not needed? I would venture to say that except for the lawyer and the owner, there's no one else here, the crowd that's here in support of this project. Right? We just had a hearing 2 hearings ago that someone from the community actually came up and said, hey, yeah, it's a great idea. I don't see anyone here saying it's a great idea. Right? To me, special means special. There should be a special exemption. I don't see a reason for a special exemption. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Jane Gentile, and I do not live adjacent to the property. I am a real estate broker who is qualified to be an expert witness in a court of law. I helped Dade County in 1986 write a special exception that we prevailed. I worked with County Attorney Bob Ginsberg. There have been 7 subsequent cases proving that we were correct. Here are some facts. The applicant has not submitted the required substantial, competent evidence which is required before you can vote on a special exception. Everything they have said has been hearsay, and they have knocked the community like we are nobody. The Third District Court of Appeals in 1998 said that the residents proved to the court as the true experts because the court said the planning boards are not the experts. The people who live in the community are the experts. And I put this case in the court, and there are 7 cases that took after this case. I'm very proud. The court ruled that the objectors provided the substantial, competent evidence to deny this. You've heard nonsense. Well, first of all, some facts. The storage sheds that have been approved, they allow up to 60 to 70 RVs per acre. 4.29 acres on Old Kings Road, a mile from our house, just been approved, and they could put a total of, 452 RVs. Okay, you can put 350 square feet. If you approve this one, we could have another 700 RVs. There is no request for any RVs. You will depreciate all the homes in Plantation Bay, specifically those in Treetop. Fact, Old Dixie Highway is 1 lane each way. The entire width of Old Dixie Highway is 22 feet. An average RV is 8 to 10 feet wide. How are you going to get this stuff out on a road that's a total of 22 feet? I had to measure it and call the county. And again, anyone who wants, I put this case in the court. The court said that the people who live here are the experts. You've heard enough to deny this. If you do approve it, it will go on appeal, and we will prevail in the court of law. We've got the cases, and I worked on one of them.
Thank you, ma'am.
My name is Bruce Tucker. I live at 15 Treetop Circle. I'd like to speak on behalf of our whole community, our whole group, our whole neighborhood tonight. Karl Marx once said that the theory of communism may be summed up in one sentence: abolish all private property. The purpose of that was to communicate to the citizens that if we can subject the citizens to a power greater than the citizens, we will be able to achieve, first and foremost, the purpose of the state. We're here tonight because we are proud of our property, our private property, our individual ability to create something we love together in a great neighborhood that we call Treetop. Samuel Adams said that among the natural rights of the colonists are these: first, a right to life; second, to liberty; and thirdly, to property, together with the right to defend them in the best manner they can. We as Treetop Circle tonight, a Treetop neighborhood, come tonight to defend the pride that we have in our neighborhood. We have a special neighborhood. And to increase what we have because we live where we live. There's one box that the attorney did not check off tonight. In the special exemption guidelines that the county goes by, number 9 says that anything that is developed must have a positive value on the economics of the adjacent neighborhood. He did not check off that box. We can do better with that property. I believe that Plantation Bay can do a better job. If we can build a $30 million center, I'm sure we could find a few dollars to possibly purchase that property and develop it so it's beautiful again. Mark Twain said that no man's life, liberty, or property are safe while the legislature is in session. Well, we're not a legislature here tonight. We're a community. We're a family. The role of this group tonight is to safeguard our properties and our pride. Our goal tonight is to appeal to you as our neighbors in our community to help us build again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other member of the public wishing to speak? Any other member of the public? If not, I'll close public comments and go to the board. Oh, yes, sir, rebuttal time. Go ahead.
Responses, if you
Yes,
don't
sir.
mind, Mr. Chairman, because a lot of issues were raised. Rob Merrill again for the record. I think a lot of the comments that came up have been discussed among the folks that are here, other than you guys. So I wanted to just put it sort of back on you for some of the subjects that I want to hit on to see if you want further elaboration from us. Suzanne LaValle talked about, and several others asked about the necessity of this business, whether it was appropriate or necessary. I don't know that that's necessarily one of your considerations. This is a planning and zoning decision you're making, the criteria there. You know, I think intuitively those questions does come up a lot in my professional judgment, and people want to know why are they building this apartment complex? Why do they want this self-storage? Intuitively, you guys I think can figure out. I wouldn't be here. The owner wouldn't be paying me and Kim and others to bring this forward if they didn't think it was necessary for their benefit. Now, back to the last comment from Bruce Tucker. I mean, good job, quoting authorities on property rights. I mean, he's here trying to exercise his property rights, just like they want to defend their property rights. Guy bought commercial property, and he thinks this is a good opportunity for him to develop RV and boat storage. Apparently, they already have it in Plantation Bay, so there's a need for it. Certainly, Halifax Plantation, probably all those folks out there that are still building house after house. Maybe he's looking at them. Who knows? I mean, there's lots of houses around here being developed and that exist now. So I think that's, if you want to talk more about that, we can. But I think that's sort of one of the subjects that came up on several occasions. A few people talked about drainage. Kim Buck over here, who I've known for many, many years, puts her certificate on the plans that says this is how this is going to be developed in terms of the drainage, the stormwater drainage, and her license is on the line. So if you want her to answer any questions for you guys, she's tried that a few times in informal settings with the group, and of course with the DRC. And I think those things have been satisfied. But since they've come up again, I wanted to make sure you guys had the opportunity to hear from her if you wanted to have her answer questions about drainage. Is that needed? I guess I should look among the board to see if it's appropriate.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have that addressed.
Tim, why don't you come up and talk about drainage? I think it's an important subject.
Good evening. Kimberly Buck with the Allen Engineering Group, representing the applicant. So I'm not sure the person that the one lady talked to at the Water Management District, but this site has been designed for full build out. So it's based on a certain percentage of of impervious area on the entire 10 acres. And so that retention pond right now is way oversized for just the storage building that is there. And so it is designed to handle the impervious area for the RVs. It's in the process of going through what's called a letter modification with the Water Management District. And the certifications have been done for the existing facility. So those are all in and done and taken care of. As far as how the site drains, the site is kind of split up into 3 basins. One basin drained towards the west, drained toward the west. And another portion of it drains towards the east, towards Plantation Bay, and kind of to the north into that ditch along Old Dixie Highway, and then a portion of it drains to the back. And so because the area to the back and the area to the west is private property, we are allowed to drain in that direction. However, I don't do that. We have basically cut off the drainage that discharges to the south and to the west, made sure that it is directed into the retention pond, and then we limit our discharge to only what was discharging in the pre-development to the ditch in Plantation Bay. And so we've kind of oversized the retention pond to redirect that drainage and still limit it to what it was draining before, but also keeping water that did drain to the south and to the west from continuing to do that. So we're hoping that we've made that a little bit of a better situation. Any other questions that you might have? I can address lighting or anything else.
I do have a question. That north east quadrant on the plan there?
Northeast, yes.
Is that a low spot, that circle, or what is that?
Yes, that was it's actually an existing water body, and so when that piece develops, it will be filled in. I don't know what it was there for, but my guess from talking with the environmentalist is that it was excavated for borrow material.
And you didn't want to put this RV boat parking area in that area?
There are plans for that parcel.
There are other plans.
Mm-hmm. We're in the process right now of designing a shopping center. Yes.
Another question, I think I know the answer, but I just want to make sure. In the proposed parking area, there'd be no cleaning of vehicles, no washing down of vehicles, no refueling of vehicles, or hazardous materials
That is correct.
other
They
than
have-
what would normally be in a boat or RV?
That is correct. There's no pump out facilities. There's no water to the RVs. They have very strict lease requirements that they have to sign, and so they're allowed to park their RV and leave it, come back, get it. You know, they're not allowed to operate them, whatever, sit in them and use their air conditioning or stay for long, extended periods of time. All of that is not permitted. They have the ability to have somebody removed if they don't abide by the regulations of the tenant lease.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for. And can I elaborate to say it's not allowed by zoning to be an RV park? It's a parking spot. Yeah.
Okay, you have a question?
Yeah, for Kim. So the southwest area, is that the and maybe Jack could even touch on it too. Is that the area problem for the drainage, and is that where everything's starting to it gets built up there, or is it further east? Where's the I don't understand, the gentleman's property is west of
The gentleman's property is to the west.
the west.
Right there, and there is a wetland on the back part of his property. A portion of that wetland is on this property, and we have provided a 25-foot buffer up against that wetland. We're not touching it. And so I think he also is concerned with the ditch out in Old Dixie Highway.
Okay.
I think that's one of the major concerns that he has, is that drainage.
And there's a drainage problem up there as well.
Yeah, in talking with him after one of the meetings, when I actually met with him while the project was under construction, and my understanding at the time was that he was concerned that the existing or the new buildings were going to, their roofs were going to drain towards him and run off onto his property. And they are not. They drain towards the paved surfaces. But, we did have this green area back there, and it's sloped off pretty good. So that green area, if it rains and the water can't absorb into that grass, then yes, it would run off onto his property. So we had the contractor create a swale back there to make sure that the water did not drain onto his property. When I met with him at one of the neighborhood meetings, I understood that that wasn't necessarily his concern. His concern was that he was trying to get water out of his property. He wanted a swale that would carry water from the back of his property out to Old Dixie. So I think that's what he was trying to do, is get the water that builds up on the back of his property and get it out to Old Dixie, and then make sure that the ditch in Old Dixie is, has access or has flow all the way to
go
Plantation
east.
Bay.
Which we can't do, right?
Which we can't do, right? We
Right.
cannot. We can't go on private property, and we can't
Being his
do-
property.
Right, and we can't do any improvements out in the right of way.
You can't
So
do anything in the
our
right
hands-
in the front of your property though.
Our hands are tied.
You couldn't do anything there neither.
So one of the other things that came up was lighting. And I want to have Kim here if you guys wanted to talk further about all the nuances with the lighting, both the existing facility and the proposed, because that's brought up by 4 or 5 people. So if you guys had questions about that.
I can tell you some of the things that came out of the neighborhood meeting if you'd like.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
So during the meetings, there were complaints about the existing facility and the lights, how bright everything was. And so we met with the contractor, talked to the electrical engineers, talked to the owners, and what they ended up doing, there were a couple things. The lights that are in those decorative windows that show the, basically they're for advertising. Yeah, kind of, I call them advertising windows. Those, yes. So there were lights that were shining, they were hung, so they shined straight down, which allowed the light to come out of the window. And the contractor discovered that they were actually improperly hung and that they were supposed to be hung on the wall and shoot towards the wall, towards the orange doors rather than out. And so that was fixed. And then also they found the electrical engineer advised them that the lights were dimmable. And so that if we set the wattage down, that it would turn from what you call like a cool light to a warm light. And so that was done as well. All the lights were changed, the wattage of all the lights were changed. And then they also decreased the time that they were on. And so in addition to dimming the lights, all of the exterior wall packs that are at the higher elevation, which Adam had shown one of the pictures that show some of the lights being turned off. So all the wall packs at the higher elevation, plus all of the pole lights, turn off at 10 o'clock when the facility closes. And hours of operation, just for clarification purposes, hours of operation, the office is closed at 6, but people have access to the storage facility until 10. So at 10 o'clock, those lights all get turned off. Now I will admit the window lights are still on. The other thing that we did is, again, just hearing the questions and comments on this new facility. One of the gentlemen had commented that there's 76 canopy lights. They're reduced in number only because we've removed one of the canopies. But we changed the length of the lights. Instead of 8-foot long lights, they're now 4-foot long lights. So we, cut that, wattage in half. They are also are dimmable. There's a control panel that the owners have access to that they can control how bright and how low those lights are. And then all of the pole lights are set for a 30% 30% of the brightness, and then they're set on a motion sensor, so that if somebody accesses the facility, they will come on and they'll stay on for 15 minutes, and then they'll go back off, to the lower setting, and then again at 10 o'clock, everything gets turned off. So those are the and we also had some wall packs that pointed towards the neighbors, and they were for the protection of those RVs that are no longer under the canopy. We had the electrical engineer look at those and determine that they weren't really necessary, and so we had those wall packs removed. I don't believe this is the most up-to-date plan, because those wall packs aren't there anymore. And
that's what I was going to say, was the wall packs you're referring to are
right
the
there,
four here,
yes.
and then
So
the four
those
here.
have all been removed. Plus, the other part of this lighting plan that's not going to be 100% accurate is they used an older version before we pushed them up and gave the 25-foot buffer. And so your spillover at the property line is going to be pretty close to zero, if not zero. So those are some of the things that we have done after meeting with the owners and listening to what they had to say.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions further?
I don't know if this is, I mean, I heard it was brought up earlier. I mean, in regards to this applicant, their track record, I mean, property taxes not being paid and other issues and stuff like that. Do we have any proof or any, I mean, can you guys elaborate on that at all? I mean, I know it's not really part of our, approval process, but it is the applicant. So, and it is our taxpayer dollars, right? So, I mean,
My understanding is the property taxes have not been paid. A tax certificate has been issued, which means we do have the funds from another buyer who bought the certificate. They have an opportunity to redeem that.
Right.
I have no idea the explanation behind that. It is
So-
not one of the criteria.
So the applicant has not paid their taxes on this property.
Correct.
And they're coming to us for an approval on their property. How can I get behind that?
It's not one of the criteria.
I
And the
understand.
taxes will get paid because if they
Right.
don't pay a couple $1,000s worth of taxes, this will be sold at auction and somebody will make a windfall.
Absolutely, I totally understand that, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around it.
Certainly, as you said, Sean,
help me here.
I can't answer because I don't know why they didn't
Yeah.
pay the tax. I do know that commercial operations do that frequently. They pay
Right.
the certificates off
Right.
and so they can pay later.
Right.
It's a cash flow thing, whatever. But in this case, like Sean said, it's absolutely not relevant to this.
I understand it. I understand it's not, but it kind of.
I hear what you're saying. It rubs you wrong. I
It
get
does,
that.
and the fact that we approved what this prior application for this applicant, and they went and cleared more than they needed to.
That was a different person, different
It was
property.
totally different person.
Totally different entity, yeah.
Totally
different
different.
people
So
altogether.
it was sold.
This guy bought it when it already happened. He's trying to fix it.
Gotcha. Okay. So it wasn't.
Well,
the
I can say,
previous one.
when I say he's trying to fix it and people grumble, you can see the pictures. All those plants were planted since the people started to say we want more plants.
Mhm.
So, and he spent a lot of money on it.
All right,
For what
I
it's
have
worth.
one question, if I remember correctly. If they don't get the special exception, can they then build the same structure as they built up front? Is that what I understood to be said? Because they
Yes.
don't have to go for a special exception?
I'll let Adam answer. My answer is yes, absolutely, under the code. And more.
There's a number of structures that could be built on this site without coming in front of you for a special exception, but just under the straight zoning. And they would have to meet the setback requirements, and the height requirements, but it would not get this extra level of scrutiny with the impact on the adjoining lands. And that was that list that Mr. Merrill provided you earlier.
Right.
Any
But
number of those
The
could be.
question is, would it be the same height? Would it be the same density as the front building, or would it be something lower? I'm just trying to understand.
It could very likely be more intense. I'm not sure about floor area ratio, but I don't think we're butting up on that with the pond and the
Because I
vacant.
think one of the problems that we're facing here is if we don't approve this, then he can come in and do something even more invasive.
I'm going to remind the public not to comment out loud, please.
Is
Public's
that
already
true or
had the
not true?
opportunity.
Because I'm trying to wrap my head around.
That is very true.
That is very true.
And there would be no public comment. There would be no public hearing. It would be just allowed under commercial zoning.
So, okay. I think everybody in this audience should think about that possibility and maybe find a happy medium someplace, because it seems that he's not going anywhere. And there's a real conundrum here,
Well,
in my mind.
Can you reiterate that one more time in regards to what Mr. Goodman said?
Sure. Yeah. What he's asking is if this is denied, could they come forward with something even more intense? And the answer is yes. And it would not be in a public hearing if it were one of the allowed uses under commercial 2 zoning. If it were not one of the permitted special exceptions. So yeah, yes, the answer is yes.
Well, on to that comment, I mean, I have two properties on the street, so I think my financial risk is as high as anybody's. And that's a valid concern. One of the people that expressed interest or concerns to me, and I don't really want this project there, but I don't want another 3-story storage unit behind the one that's there either. And they wouldn't have to come here for that. Or more garage spaces that are back there. So that is the concern. It is a commercial property. I like the trees back there. But just so we all know, the person has the right to develop their property. We can't stop everything. So it's just something to consider. What is the best case scenario versus another scenario? Just something to think about.
So to close from my standpoint, and I'll sit down, I just want to say that in talking to the property owner, I don't know about the timing for the payment of their taxes, but I do know they've expressed to me they plan to build something on this property. And when you look at the list, I can't find anything. Oh, some of the folks said they wanted a nursing home or something else, but I can't find much anything on the list that is less intense, that is better suited to be compatible with these residents. And I don't think I said what a couple of them said about me saying I'm going to squeeze, or the developer is going to squeeze everything we can out of them. I guess you guys can reach your own conclusion about whether I would say that. But at the end of the day, I think, in fact, what they're trying to do is get a return on their investment. And I think if you guys are business people, you'll understand that. And I know that it's very likely, and this is what they've told me, is if they say no to the special exception, we come back with a site plan for something. And, he's got other investors that are thinking about other things. And I think these folks are going to be a lot better off with RV and boat storage, because I've seen it. I have seen it next to people's houses. Very quiet. Don't even know it's there. As long as they do the buffer, I agree that the previous property owners took those trees out. They're their own worst enemy. Why would they? There's no reason to do that. It didn't benefit them at all. It was a mistake by a contractor. Think about it. Why would they have done that? It doesn't help them at all to take those trees out. It's the contractor's fault. End of the day, the next guy that comes in is trying to do his best to fix it. He's also trying to make sure it doesn't happen again on the property to the west. And they're going to have a nice buffer. I think it's going to be the best project they could hope for, other than nothing, which I think some folks think could happen.
Maybe maybe the developer could try harder to be a good neighbor. I'm just, as a businessman, and you look at what can happen, what cannot happen. Both parties might want to sit down again, and I understand you're shrugging your shoulders because you've tried it twice, but third time might be the charm. And more trees and better buffers. Maybe take out a row of those parking things. All right, so he makes a few bucks less, but at least he has happy neighbors. I mean, I can understand the people living next to this. I mean, there's lots of arguments back and forth. There's arguments, well, you bought the house, you knew it was commercial property to begin with, but, people don't always think of that. And, to have neighbors that are happy, and then you still can do what you want, because obviously I don't think you really do want to build a building there, because that'll cost too much money and you don't know if you're going to get a return on that, whereas you might get a return on this parking. I would rethink the number of spaces that you're having, and I would rethink the replanting of buffers to make the buffer much wider, and possibly, I don't know what the code will allow as far as the height of a fence. I don't know if can the fence be any higher, Adam? On the code.
Fences can, short answer is yes. I mean, you can always, we're typically capping out right around 6 feet, but it's, there are variances that are possible. We have had 8-foot fences before.
So I'll say to your point, if you're done, I don't want to.
I'm done. Go on.
So
I just was
think,
voicing my opinion.
So let me say a couple of things. One, Kim and I, as locals, have been doing this for a very long time. I'm 4th generation here in Volusia, Flagler County. Kim's been here quite a while too. We don't take these things on as if we're trying to do something that we can't live with later, right? So when I encountered this property owner, she and I both said, look, we see there's a lot of sensitivity, especially from the previous property owner, what they've done. We need to sit down and talk to these folks. And so I did talk to these guys after the DRC, and I didn't say exactly what she said, but at the end of the day, we had 2 meetings to talk about it, and I think we've done a lot. So Kim is reminding me that we did remove some of the spaces. We've done a lot more landscaping. We've promised the lighting. We've done a lot of stuff. Is it everything they want? Absolutely not. That's not what compromise is about. We do everything they want. We'll never get a return. So what my guys told me as of the last go around with the neighbors is, I can't go in. I can't do any more. I'd have to switch to a different development program. For this project, for this to be marketable and give him a return, this is what he's got to do. He's at that edge. You know, obviously there's got to be some profit for the guy, but he's whittled it down to a place where he's not going to make enough money to do the deal at some point. And that's the business part of this. That's not your consideration, but you're asking questions that result in what he can or can't do. And that's kind of where we are. I will say, though, that as was mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, special exceptions, unlike the previous site plan approval that ended up getting conditions in it, I don't know how, but I guess that could happen voluntarily. You guys do have the discretion to say, we'd like to be done this way, differently. And you have as long as you're within the bounds of the land development code, I think you can do that. So if you were to say, I want a different fence, or I want a different, and it is something that promotes the criteria that are listed, that's within your prerogative. So have at it if you think that's the right thing to do.
I mean, I think, you know, those whatever dozen RV spaces that are slammed up against that property line, which is treetop, you know, I mean, if those weren't there, it'd be a lot easier to digest. I think it might be a lot easier to digest for the treetop owners. But, you know, you have a dozen RV just parked, you know, pretty darn close to their property.
So the scale is deceiving, I would say, and that's just an editorial comment, but I would say factually and legally, 35 feet is the setback, 25 is the buffer. If we built a 65-foot tall nightclub there, we could do it within 35 feet.
Right.
With a 10-foot buffer.
Yep.
That's factual.
Yep.
It's legal.
Absolutely.
End of story.
Yep.
What we're doing is better. That's all I can say.
We are,
Okay.
Mr.
Any
Chair.
other comments, Adam, from staff?
Mr. Chair, I wanted to mention that with a special exception, we don't have to adhere to the minimum setbacks. We have to consider the impact on the neighboring communities. That's the whole point of a special exception site plan review. So yeah, they are meeting the minimum. You mentioned the southernmost row of outdoor storage spots without the canopy. You're allowed to say, well, those look a little too much, and to make that your recommendation.
I like that. Mr. Goodman seems like he is on that
I
same
would
page.
make a motion that we approve this special exception, but with the following caveats, that the setback be enlarged to do away with the, whatever it is, 13 uncovered spaces along the southern border, and to make it a much bigger buffer, replace the 6-foot fence with an 8-foot fence. And in the area to the south of the retention pond, by the picture that I saw, enlarge the green area with more trees to give a better buffer. That would be my recommendation.
And then keep in line with staff's conditions A through E suggested, and also the fire chief conditions.
Yes.
I suggest we might want to be a little more specific. maybe not indicating they have to get rid of those 12 spaces, but instead, say whatever, something specific like the buffer has to be 45 feet instead of 25 feet. Then they can reconfigure the whole thing if they want to. I don't know if they would just eliminate the 12 or they would change their parking, but everything would be shoved back. And it'd be pretty easy to hold them to that rather than say just eliminate spots.
Mr. Chairman, if I could mention something, and didn't talk with the applicant about this, then it was only us in our sidebar. We've got this stretch of no man's land back here behind the rear of one of the buildings that's there now. What if those spaces, then those 13, shifted up to the north line and were angled then, with the parking there, and then the entirety of the rest of it shifted down. And so what you do is you trim this off. All of these would then be shifted to the north. The number stays the same. Those are then butting up to the backside of a storage building that exists now. They still get the end result number that they asked for. You still have the same circulation that you had. Everything shifts down. It would give an ability for a larger buffer because right now we've got some area that's 5 feet, whatever it is, it's between that doesn't have to be there. You'd end up gaining it at the back. Maybe even then allowing that to be covered, they may gain back their covered area because, this middle section that has the 24 would then still be at least 35, would probably be greater than, I think that would meet your 45 your prescribed 45-foot setback because you're going to have this landscape buffer area 25 plus at least the width of the access road that's here, the access drive as your separation distance from the property line to the edge of the awning cover.
Or you could just move everything north.
Or you can just
like
move
it
everything
is.
north. Exactly.
Just shift everything north to provide a 45-foot buffer at the bottom.
I was hoping with mine, the idea would be the only thing you'd have to deal with then closer to your treetop would be the driveway, which again, maybe it's not that much of a switch. I'm moving my parking further away. That the impact of having maybe again, it's not much of a swap, but
Or we could just recommend the 45-foot and they could
and just
deal
leave
with
it at that.
They could deal with it however they.
Just make them deal with it.
I kind of like that because they might, right now it looks like all these are the same depth. They may change. They might have some shorter spots and longer ones depending on what people rent.
I will amend it to
And they
be
can figure it out.
45 feet.
Okay, so as it stands, we have a motion with, to approve it with the recommendations of the county, plus provide a 45-foot buffer at the south end of the property. Is that correct?
Well, what's the length of those parking spots right now? Those diagonal ones?
I don't know.
6 and
I didn't see the length.
27.
I saw the width. I didn't see the.
The length is what, 20?
26.95.
And you already have how many feet of buffer?
25.
25.
So
Yeah,
you're looking at a-
10-foot
you're
natural.
looking at a 50-foot buffer.
Looking at another 20 feet of buffer is all you need. You already have 25.
Well, I was going to say, make it a even 50. That way you have a good buffer, you have plantings, you have a higher fence, you reduce the visibility, the noise.
Would you reduce those pole lights? You wouldn't need those pole lights.
You wouldn't need those
either.
pole lights then.
There's 3 pole lights along the.
They won't go in the buffer. The buffer's
Yeah, the buffer, there's a buffer, so there would be no
Right.
lights there either.
Right. I'm
What do you think? He would wants to hold it at 45. I'm thinking 50.
I don't see any sense in moving it to 50. 45 is
What's your thought?
way higher than the requirement.
5's substantial.
All right.
I'm fine with
All right,
45.
so let's make it 45 then.
Okay.
Mr. Goodman, if I could ask also, are you talking about replacing the existing 6-foot vinyl fence that's there? Because that's not theirs, I don't believe. That's ICI's. So you would have an 8-foot fence abutting the 6-foot is what you'd prescribe, or?
I would suggest it.
Okay.
This way it gives the residents more of a privacy. With the extra planting, they should have a very nice buffer.
Just want to make sure everybody knows that fence isn't the
Right,
developed.
so there'd be a
isn't the
secondary
applicant's
fence.
Okay.
Except when you go to build a fence, you start ripping trees down, and that's what's there now. So I don't know how much would be tore out when you add a fence.
Yeah, I would be more satisfied with more trees, higher trees than and I know when you start going to an 8-foot fence, the wind load, and you know they're more liable to fall over and things to that nature. So I would be more opted to go with more plantings, higher plantings than the fence.
Okay. Let's try it. See, somebody want to reword this?
Because I understand it, you're just requiring a 45-foot buffer at the bottom, at the
Correct.
south end.
Okay.
And then the developer deals with that
Yes.
space as they see fit.
Just to clarify, though, so I understand, 45-foot buffer, does that mean they can clear it and replant, or they can't touch it?
I wouldn't imagine they would want to clear it.
Not to be cleared, it has to be natural and planted.
No one knows, or we're not sure?
No, that's what the caveat.
They're going to
That's
come
set.
back to us with
There's an engineering component that Kim
Oh,
wants to
they
give
have-
you guys input on.
I'm just trying to understand.
Okay, so it's going to take some of that buffer to get back down to grade. And so we would clear some of that, and then that would be additional plantings along that buffer slope, and then the rest of it would remain natural. So it would be a combination of, augmented plantings plus the natural buffer.
Plus what's there.
Which is what we have now. That's what we were proposing in the 25 feet. Is
Correct.
a mix of both.
To make the buffer wider and more substantial.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just would like to mention one thing. I don't need to do this, but we're a recommending body. No?
Not on this one.
Okay.
You are approving
Okay.
approving with conditions.
All right, so we have a motion
Correct.
on the floor. Do we have a,
Clarify that for me. There were some things of confusion. I just want to make sure I got it.
Yes, let's
Clarify the
restate that
motion?
for the record.
Yeah, if you could just restate the motion, please.
you want me to do that?
Sure.
Okay, the motion is that we're going to increase the southern buffer from 25 to 45 feet.
And reduce and take away those 13 parking spots.
Yes, well, that will, increasing it to 45 feet will take away those spots unless they just decide to shift everything north.
So you guys did say that if we reconfigure the 45, once you do that, that's what you have.
Right.
We may be able to move it around somehow. Kim was kind of whispering in my ear, there's a way you might be able to switch things around.
Right.
I think if you get into micromanaging the site plan aspect of it,
Right.
we might get wrapped around the axle, but
Okay.
Yep. So basically, the motion is to increase the southern border to 45-foot buffer.
And
then also the conditions from staff.
the conditions
A
from
through E,
staff.
From
And
staff.
also the fire chief conditions.
Right. Right?
Yes.
Okay, we have a
Correct.
motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion carries. Thank you. We will now go to item number 7.
What
On
is
the-
the process for appeal, Sean? How do we appeal?
process to appeal to the commission?
Ma'am, you can address that after the end of the meeting. We're still in a meeting. Item number 7, legislative, and it's not requiring disclosure of ex parte communication, consideration of amendment to the Land Development Code related to tree requirement, caption similar to that. Do you want me to read this, Adam?
No, sir, you don't have
Okay.
to.
Okay.
So what we have with this one is that it's an attempt by us, and based on several applications we had that had come forward, primarily subdivisions and primarily PUDs that had come forward. And what they've done is they've basically created the moonscape. You may have heard us talk about it before. The LDC at present allows a developer for a residential subdivision to have 2 tracks that they would head in. And historically, we've had both. We've had one that has been where you leave the lots in their natural condition and leave it to the eventual homeowner to come in and deal with the final grading. You have a construction plan that's approved that shows a lot grading plan that has it where they're either pitched high at the back so they drain forward to the street, or they're maybe split, or they're opposite, they're pitched high at the front and they drain to the back of the lots where they drain into common drainage areas. That's one option, is having it where the streets are put in, trees are removed where the streets are, where you have common infrastructure, where you'd have common stormwater, but the lots are left in their natural condition. And then the expectation then is that as the contractors come in, they'll remove the trees that they cannot keep. They'll keep the ones that are able to remain. They'll do their grading. Everything will be great in the end. The other option, and I think less Pollyanna than that first one, is the realist option, is create the moonscape. That you know what you're having at the beginning. By moonscape, I'm somewhat derisively referring to coming in and putting in your final grading approximately at the time of your construction of your common infrastructure in your subdivision. So the 2 tracks are allowed right now. You can pick and choose as a developer. What we've had the perception of at the Board of County Commissioner level is that folks have been pushing the scale the way that is not what was intended through the LDC. Through the subdivision process, and being able to then effectively clear cut without any impact, without any resulting penalty. So in the situation where the lots are left in their natural condition, the final contractor comes in, does the on-site assessment of the index trees, those hardwoods 6 inches or greater, does that plan that includes the grading, looks at the footprint, looks at what's needed on the site, potentially well, septic, all the infrastructure, and decides then what they can effectively remove and what they can keep. Usually what we end up in those situations is we end up with perimeter trees, those that are sitting right along the property line that are kind of shared between one or the other. And those have low likelihood of success of living through an iteration of the next lot to develop. If it's not removed at this current lot that's going under development, it'll be removed at the neighbor when that happens. Typically because, if nothing else, we're trying to get the common swale to happen. And so the problem is more than just a tree issue as much as it's a drainage issue, as much as it's it's more broadly than what our limited reach is here. But what we've put into this is what we think is a good first step by having what has been lacking before is a tree survey that's done at the initial phase of your lot layout. What we're trying to get at is this idea that, and the intent language is in our code right now that says, hey, by the way, when you're there, you're trying to lay out your lots, you should have some respect for the natural characteristics of the land. And so not just tree protection, but also wetlands, your topography. It should play into how you do this. Historically, our experience is no different than anyone else's, though, is that instead of doing that, people look at the rectangle or the rhombus or whatever it may be, and then lay out their streets, end up putting their stormwater where the streets aren't, and then end up creating rectangles or squares along the street frontage and then call it done. without really any respect to the natural characteristics that they started with the land. This requires then at least that check at the beginning that says for your sketch plat, your preliminary plat, we want to see that. This also then goes through final plat approval. We want to have, to the extent that there's a tree planting requirement with the final plat, that you would have an affidavit from the engineer or landscape architect or arborist that says that those trees that are common trees have been planted according to the final plat requirements. That won't include those on the lots themselves. Those lots would have a separate requirement that would come in. A little different, we're going to, instead of calling these index trees, we're going to change the terminology to protected trees. And the protected trees then will also include specimen trees and historic trees. Specimen 18 inches or greater, DBH, historic trees 36 inches or greater. Trees within or immediately adjacent to a proposed single-family dwelling footprint would be excluded. That's something different than what we've had so far. So far, we've included those so that the idea was, and our argument for working against that, for doing it how we've been doing it now, is that the potential was there for somebody to game the system, we thought, on a smaller property, come in with a plan that would allow them then to basically clear cut the lot and then change their building scheme. It's probably not very realistic, because if you go through and you submit a complete permit with your vertical construction, your building plans, you're not going to change your scheme midstream and go from a 3.2 1,800 square feet to a 2.2 at 1,200, and all for purposes of being able to cut down the treaty oak that's in the middle of your lot. So one of the things that we're doing, and this is consistent with what others have done, so we looked at other codes to get there, we're exempting that footprint plus immediately adjacent. Some discussion right now still, what do we mean by immediately adjacent? Whether that ends up ultimately falling out as within 5 feet of the proposed building foundation, within 10 feet. We got some discussion going on that. And so we're looking at it right now saying there still ought to be maybe some subjectivity that we have in there. We certainly know that different trees have different growth patterns, have different spread of their canopy, and there's also some viability issue that's here. If we have a live oak that's within 10 feet of a proposed building foundation, that doesn't make a lot of sense for us to say that that's something that should remain, that they should count that as contributing to their tree requirements, because at 19 out of 10, it's going to create a conflict with the home in the end. So there's some, maybe it's nuanced at this point, maybe it will depend on the species, maybe it will be something that will say 5 or 10 feet. We definitely don't want to create a conflict with the root line or the drip line with an existing, with a proposed construction project with this, but that's something yet for us potentially to work through. Tree retention replacement requirements are changing. 40% of your pre-development inches are changing to 50%, and then from 35% for multifamily and 20% for non-residential, with both of those increasing to 70%. That's probably the biggest change that's happening with this, is that that's a pretty significant increase. That's going to have some conflicts, because you can imagine we're requiring you right now to replant on your property. Scenic A1A, similar changes from 40 to 50, and then non-residential runs from 50 to 70%. So one of the things we're doing then, because of the problems we've had before, and all this prompted not only by the subdivision side, but also you remember the gentleman that came in and appealed because he couldn't put all the trees that he had to put on there. Again, his contractor erred somewhat and took 2 of the trees out that were big that would have helped him credit-wise. We wanted to set up a tree bank fund so that if you're unable for whatever reason, it should be at a high enough expense, at a large enough expense where it would discourage you from automatically moving to the tree fund. And so right now we're having it tied to a wholesale value of a replacement container tree of a certain size, and that we would adjust that annually is how we've structured that. But that's something still yet to maybe be determined also. But what we've talked about operationally is we would ask at the beginning of each calendar year, we would ask for a RFP or RFQ from a nursery or a group of nurseries locally for certain caliper-sized trees. And then that also, it wouldn't be an exercise of futility, it would set our value, but it would also be something that we would use later, because the use of the tree bank funds would be used by the county to plant trees. And so we wouldn't just be going through the motions, we'd also be asking them, what would you charge us for a 10-foot live oak? And so they'd come back and tell us, here's what we'd let you, what we'd honor then for the next year. And so we'd set up that scale, that menu of the pricing. Ideally, we do it annually so we can handle then any changes, any inflation that may happen, any changes in availability of landscape stock. I also threw in at the very end of when we were working through this, and it's been several months, an option for a variance. And I got to say, I didn't really think this out too much, other than other articles had an option for a variance. Legitimately, if you have the tree bank fund, you already have the out clause that's there. But I was saying just as well that maybe we do want to have an opportunity for a variance because everything else in our code has that ability. If you think about it in Article 7, the planning board sits as the sign variance board of appeals, is how our code calls it out. And so in this situation, I would see then the board being able to grant a variance for these criteria. Maybe some reason has a hardship, but realizing that a financial hardship is not sufficient grounds for a variance. So there ought to be something else here other than I can't afford it. So what that would look like ultimately, I don't know. I do think that should stay in there, but I don't know what the final iteration of that would be. As we're sitting now, it would be our same 4 variance criteria owing to special conditions on the property, not owner-created hardship, that kind of language. It would still play in for a variance. And again, that may still be something that would fall out. We did have a couple of public comments. I did send those to you late, and we've reached out to a couple of groups and asked for those comments. We still have some time, I think, for them to come back with those more formally, and we'll see where that takes us. We are on a bit of a time schedule here, at least as we've sketched it out. We do have this already scheduled for first reading July 15th, so next week, first reading by the Board of County Commissioners, and then if everything goes well, then second reading and adoption August 5th. I will say a couple of things. This is not to be considered as the end. This, I think, is a fix. It's a interim fix. I don't want to call it a Band-Aid. It's not that. But realizing that we will go back and readdress the land development code when we get the comp plan done. And so we are starting those initial phases of the LDC rewrite. We've been directed by administration to work on an RFQ, get that out, get that started before we get the comp plan done. So realizing all that as a precursor, these things may change a bit, but this is, in my opinion, a good first effort. That final part that I put in here, this is that when Mr. Goodman had talked about it before, that, hey, what we want to get more involved in that. So I included that in the slide, just that this is the prerogative of why the planning board is being asked for this. I don't want to overly burden you with this now, at least as far as the timing. So with the schedule that I provided to you, I don't want you to feel as if you got no choice. You've got to do one of these three things today. Well, one of these 3 things, certainly you should. I mean, but the third one, the continuance could be a viable option. So don't discount me by telling you the schedule that I'm trying to be on and how aggressive it is as compelling you to say, we recommend approval or denial, or we recommend these changes. I did want to get it out to you. We did get it out to you a little bit early, but again, if you have more time that you want to devote to this, certainly I and staff are willing to take a slower roll on this if you wish to. And so it's certainly within your prerogative to continue this to your next meeting. We'd like for you to give good comments, not only now if you feel able to, but definitely by August. July, when are we at? August,
July.
Goodness, it's flying by. And realizing that our schedule at the Board of County Commissioners can move. So that they are very much dependent on you, on your recommendation on this, and they are looking to you to make some substantive comments as far as how we'd head with this. So with that lengthy, I'll close. Wait, questions or
Thank you.
comments?
I have a question.
I've said enough. Yes, sir.
As far as the tree bank is concerned, where do you plan on planting these trees?
We talk directly. So a good example is Bay Drive Park as an example. And so one of the things we talked about there, and thinking intuitively, maybe we come back with some sand live oak, try to restore those. Maybe that's not such a good idea there, but I think we open it up where we have the clusters of 3 palms. Historically, we've counted the clusters of 3 palms within the Hammock Dunes DRI as being the equivalent of a shade tree, and that cluster then being somewhere around 8 or 10 feet together. Maybe we do some palm planting there. Maybe we do some sand live oaks. Definitely, we've got some areas. But you got a good point. At some point, we're going to exceed the carrying capacity of public lands, and so that one of the things we had done is we said, what if we open this up in the tree fund for purchase or maybe less than fee purchase of lands that have good tree canopy. So maybe we have something by less than fee. I'm talking about a conservation easement, something we haven't done before for purposes of preserving a tree canopy. We could then, and it wouldn't maybe even be an entirety of a parcel. It could be a portion of a parcel. So let's say we have one of these on the barrier island right now in the hammock. It's a private parcel that's basically surrounded by the greenway. South of Publix, I don't want to call it out. You probably already know if you know where I'm talking about. It's a long strip. It's under some development pressure. It's got great canopy throughout. What if we acquired a conservation easement on the east portion and then allowed them to develop on the west, so that we'd then be able to preserve 50% of the canopy, and then they could then go and effectively remove on the rest. But we'd have then some extra responsibility then, because it would then be under a conservation easement, and an extra ordinary ability, I think, then to preserve those trees than if we just had the developer setting it aside in and saying, I'm not going to do anything with that.
All right. Yeah, no, because I know along A1A now, the state and their infinite wisdom decided to put down killer, and they've impacted a couple of dozen trees. You're aware of that.
We're still trying to figure out what they did. And
I know exactly what they did.
You
They
did?
used ground clear, the real strong stuff. They sprayed it in there like they were watering the trees. The trees absorbed it, and they went into shock, and some of them will never come out of shock. They're just going to die where they stand, and some of them have been over pruned. So it's a combination of things. The other big problem that goes hand in hand with this is the finding a way to eliminate the potato vine, because that is strangling so many trees. I mean, I just removed a ton of that from one of my properties, which I got in trouble for. But the potato vines are killing more oaks than anything else. So that, in the rewrite, maybe somewhere there should be some sort of verbiage regarding the potato vines and, finding, removing them from your property, or, something along those lines. And the other thing that I thought about was, when people plant new trees on their property or business, you have to maintain it for 2 years now?
Yes, sir.
I would extend that time period, because I've noticed people plant trees and then 2 years later, there are no trees.
Yes, sir.
So maybe stretch it out to 5 years or 8 years, because, give the trees a chance to grow. I mean, I have properties, I've planted trees, and I'm proud that they all grow and they're all watered, they're all fertilized, and we maintain them.
Adam, I've had a problem with some of this tree ordinance stuff over the years, and I'll tell you why. We got property out in Hall Creek. Some of it's got a lot of live oak trees, pine trees, gum trees, big shade trees all over the place. One of my sons wanted to build a house, and he decided instead of building it on a piece of property like that, he would build it on a 10-acre piece of property that was a cow pasture. And the reason he picked that, partly because it was the front of it was on a hard road and the side of it was on a dirt road, but there were no trees on it. It's a cow pasture. Well, the county required him on that 10 acres to plant 40 trees. And the reason he picked it to begin with, because he didn't want the trees. I mean, it seems a little bit crazy to me. I mean, it worked out because I discovered that along the fence line on one side, there were some trees growing. And we counted those, and that was okay, but I don't understand why if you got a piece of property, you require somebody to plant trees when the property don't have trees there to begin with.
I'm going to try to show you, and I don't think I'm going to see if I can do it. If I do this.
And it's all our properties, agricultural property, timber and cattle and stuff like that. So, I mean, you could have picked a piece with a lot of big, beautiful oak trees on it.
Oh, that's it.
Didn't want to do that.
So what we had in mind, and see if this covers what you're talking about, because we were talking, this sentence in double underline, the development of a single family dwelling. We were trying to touch on that, and we were hoping this would cover that, because we had two situations that were going on. One was the replanting, and the other one was the tree count itself. That if you had the 10 acre, we'd come back and tell you, congratulations, you got a great piece of property. You need to do an index tree survey on the 10 acres. And so we've had kind of a rule of thumb where we said, okay, no, we're only going to limit you. You only have to come back and tell us that impact area, the 1 acre that you're intending to clear or otherwise develop for your homestead. That's the only part we really need to find out about. But at the same time, though, you've said it right. The replanting has been the shade tree requirement has been the one that we've come back and had a lot of hand wringing on. And usually that ends up being the perimeter is what you end up having, because having somebody in a pasture, it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to plant 40 trees. That doesn't make sense. We wanted, and I think it's this sentence only, to exempt that. That situation that you're describing, and specific in the AC and the AC2 zoning districts. And so I don't know if that's what we've and for single family dwelling purposes.
Right.
So that I'm hoping that covers that, but
that makes a lot more sense. Any other questions for Adam?
I don't have any, no.
No questions?
I guess we have to decide on if we should kick this down the road a little bit further and wait for
We need to open this up to the public, Adam.
Yes, sir. I'd say so, just for public comment, and whichever action you take. I think even if you're going to continue, I think it's good to get public comment.
Okay, we'll open it up to the public, and we have the lady present that's here to some meetings, and I'm sorry I forget your name, but if you're wishing to comment on this.
Thank you for the email, Adam.
Sure, you're welcome.
Robin Pauletta, Halifax Plantation. I stuck around because I'm very concerned about this, and I know there are other groups that I've been with and still, and groups that still keep an eye on development. I'm on the board of our HOA, and I've been doing an index tree survey with our landscape pond committee chair. And we're really fortunate in our developer who developed the old Belglades property. He kept so many historic trees. We lost some in Matthew, but we still have so many. Just on my street alone, excuse me, on the backside, they're just amazing, and they're gorgeous, and they're historic. 36 inches. I'm talking trees like this. And I think that is a main concern, is to preserve those historic trees. We're their guardians. So 36 inches on up, those trees need to stay. I don't care if it's in the middle of a flippin' house plan. I'm going to put my pool here and there's this majestic oak in the way. No, that oak gets to stay because it's got a 200+ year history. And it deserves to be there for future generations. We're caretakers. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. I just want to make sure that this draft protects those trees because they deserve it. Our future generations need it. Plus, they're huge carbon sinks. What can I say?
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am,
Adam, is
what
there
was the
a
last name? I'm sorry.
Polletta. Polletta.
Adam? Is there a regulation at this point regarding historic oaks?
Short answer, no. That you're penalized because of the mass, the inches, and so that if you had 100-inch oak tree, then your replanting requirement, then you can remove it, and that's what we said in the a little hard for everybody to understand. In the hammock, you've got the the example is, I hate to say it, it's a single lot on Sanchez that's there, not dissimilar from the gentleman that came in, but he didn't exactly have this. But you have a 100-inch oak that's in the center of the lot. He's going to have to remove it to put the house there. He's only got one lot. He can't do anything different, and so he's going to take that down, and then he's got to replant. He'll replant 40% of those inches, and so then he has a automatic replanting requirement of 40 inches, and he'll have to do that on the property. Now that doesn't mean he can't be creative still, but that means that he's coming back with those 40 inches to replant.
I can understand Ms. Palletta's position, but it would create a huge private property issue, private property rights issue. I don't think so.
Mr. Goodman, there is just one provision we have in the code for historic trees, and the county commission has to deem a tree to be of historic value. And I think the only one that they have done so is some trees on the old Moody Homestead, which is a park that very few people know about right here on 100.
Yeah.
So it's a designation by the county commission. It's totally separate from this
Well, I'm going
regime.
to go a little bit further with that. Because I live up in the hammock, and I was surprised when I drove by the Baptist church that they were removing 3 large oaks, and then they told me, they had permission, and I, remembering back years ago that the only permission that they were going to do was along Sanchez was a takeout of Magnolia, and all of a sudden I see they're taking out 3 big oaks. And I'm going to say that their property is close to 2 acres, and they had a lot of open space there. So if they needed to build another structure, why did they have to pick that location? Again, it's hindsight, but it's something to look at the future. If you have a big enough parcel, why not reconfigure something to save those large oak trees?
Their biggest problem, and not that I want to get too deep into theirs because I actually have some correspondence underway with them right now, and so I will maybe counter their assertion that they have permission and say that may not be the case.
Oh, okay.
But the quick part is that the problem and the realistic problem for them and others is right now it's working against us. I don't mean it. Everything's got a double-edged sword to it. It's a lack of septic because sewer service, because they've had to have a septic tank and drain field, and so it wasn't just the idea of trying to locate in a structure as much as that situation was a drain field issue that I'm recalling, and so it takes up so much space. Now, no doubt about it, you can have the ATU systems, the advanced treatment systems, that cut some of that down, but that's not always, whatever reason, that's not always the first option. The ATUs, I think, are with saying it in the inaccurate way, I will say it. They are smaller that I know of, but they have more maintenance. They're more costly. But again, there's a trade-off.
Well,
Balance. You're right.
Sorry, that in these small lots. I mean, it's ridiculous how. But anyway, I think it would be nice if there was something. I understand the guy with a single lot and he couldn't, the one big tree, and I guess that tree's got to go for him to build. But let's say a developer maybe there's something for developers that's different. If somebody's doing 100 acres, 200 acres along John Anderson or Old Kings, maybe they have to leave the Majestic Oaks at least 70% of them, and they make their roads go around them, or they you don't develop that lot. You have some that just sit, and I don't know if that's fair to that developer versus the single lot owner, but maybe if there's a stipulation like that, we can save a lot of them that way rather than just going and clear cut, and then put these little puny trees in that take another 200 years. I'm just
voicing his opinion.
I did pull up here, and you can see it here. This is a section from the ordinance, and so part of what we want to do, the distinction between the protected specimen and historic, is that your replanting requirement is a little more onerous, and so that if you take down the historic tree, then your replacement is going to be minimum 6 inches. Measured 6 inches above grade. So you're already tying your hands. You're having to come with the bigger tree. Now, and I guess I'll say that now, the out loud part that probably somebody's screaming at their TV right now saying, but you just said the tree fund. And so I don't have to do that. I can always just pay to my tree fund. There's always an out. And I suppose that's true. But the intent here with this is that you'll have a greater than typical replanting if you're removing something that's bigger from the onset.
All right, let me close public comments. Come forward. You didn't take your 3 minutes anyway. We'll give you another minute here.
Shut up and let everybody go home. Robin Paletta, Halifax Plantation, Phase 1. My first key question is, does this new ordinance require a tree survey prior to any platting or PUDs being
Yes,
submitted?
it does.
Yes.
So it's going to require that kind of survey so that historic trees and so forth will be identified ahead of time.
Yeah, they do size and type of tree and all that.
Right, but that hasn't protected them in the past. The other question is too, with the replanting, are you going to be requiring replanting of, say, if a historic or specimen live oak is taken down, that it be replanted with the same tree, a live oak? I mean, are you going to be that specific? A wise man once said, I plant a tree not for myself, but for the future. So, I mean, is that the kind of specificity that you're going to require?
We've talked about that. We've had in the code we've had before. I think there is a live oak. There has been. Maybe it's been in some PUDs or development orders we've had. We've had some that have required live oaks removed to be replaced with live oaks specifically, not anything else. So no other tree types. Magnolia didn't require magnolia. I think safe to say right now that the only replacements would be from the index tree list, and so we haven't said that in this iteration of the code.
I didn't see the index tree list, but I would really strongly suggest that if a historic live oak is being taken down, that a live oak be planted.
Protected trees.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I'm closing public comments. Anything else from the board? Any more questions to staff?
Make a motion to adjourn.
It's just a tad premature, but
Getting past my bedtime.
So, I mean, in regards to this, I mean, we're 4 of 7 right now. To
Oh, yeah,
make a
we have
decision.
to,
Yeah,
I would kick it down the road.
at least for, to let the other 3 members of our board be a part of it, or at least get a couple more input,
agree
and
with
then
that.
we could look at it between now and the next meeting as well.
For purposes of the record, do you mind just making a motion and a vote to continue to
Oh, sure.
next month? Do we need date and time certain?
We could.
Yeah, date and time certain. So what is the date of our next meeting?
Thirteenth? I think it's August
Yeah,
13th, right?
August 13th at 6 p.m. or soon thereafter?
I'll make a motion to continue the discussion to August 16th, 13th, August 13th.
At 6 p.m.
Of the tree ordinance.
I'm not going to be here. I got to move my daughter into college.
That's convenient.
Good, that's a good reason.
But I think it would still be important to.
Let the other members. Okay, we have a motion to continue it to the August meeting.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item, staff comments.
Only thing to add is if you have written comments and you're not going to be here, submit those also. I know I'm not supposed to talk about agenda items in my comments, but if you have those, we'll encourage you to do that. Also, we did send you, and so we're not trying to dump, but Mr. Goodman asked for it, so we're going to we deliver.
Feast of famine, right?
That's right, exactly. So now you're drinking from the fire hose, but
Oh, my
realize we haven't come back and said what we're trying to do there is we're not committing you to a decision point on that. We do have a joint workshop that we're going to be contacting you about here. We're hoping to schedule that in the first couple of weeks of August. So that'd be similar to the joint workshops we've had before. This will be the last one, I think, with the Planning Board and Board of County Commissioners on our comp plan process. And so we'll have that. We'll be contacting you separately on those. But if you have those comments on index trees or on the tree requirements, not indexed, protected, come back with those. You are able, because these are legislative actions, you are able to discuss these, somewhat openly, and definitely from the public. So remember what Mr. Moylan had said before. If you've got folks that are out there and they contact you and they say, "Hey, I want," you're able to discuss that, get into that those discussions with them. We want you to get that feedback, and we want you to be able to express that both in the tree requirements and in our comp plan discussions as those progress. And with that, I'll thank you. I'll close.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any board comments?
No, this was a long one.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.